Subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Incomplete, as if they had been eaten by large creatures. Some lost their heads, some lost arms and legs, and internal organs. Blood was everywhere. The rotten smell permeated the whole manor. Those who were still alive immediately vomited when they saw this picture. Here is no longer Nasla Manor, but a rotten hell. Richard came out of the back garden. All the people who were still alive walked out of the building. The number, less than Richard had expected. Nasra, Nyan, Karapika, Basho Melody. Except for a part of the returning convoy, the rest were all dead. This means that before Richard and the others returned to Nasla Manor, resentment was born. Richard and the others slammed into the realm of resentment. Karapika told the survivors what happened. All of a sudden, there was a trace of luck on everyone's face. The luck of the afterlife. And when he looked at Richard, he couldn't help but be grateful. It is because of Richard's existence that they can survive. Without Richard, all of them, including Nathra, Karapika, Nyan, are dying at the hands of this grudge. Because they didn't even notice that something was wrong. Thanks. Everyone bowed deeply to Richard. No, I'm just saving myself. If Richard hadn't entered the realm of resentment and couldn't get out, he wouldn't have taken such a big risk. However, for Nasla et al. Regardless, Richard saved their lives. I'll make a call first and report this matter to the Hunter Association. For solving such a thing, the Hunter Association is rewarded. Last time I worked with Yorkshire. This time, it is equivalent to Richard solving it alone, which makes no sense. Hunter Association needs this information. The appearance of resentment is a huge threat to the whole world. Yorkshire Senior. 99, it's Richard, what's wrong? I've got resentment again. What? Yorkshire was taken aback. The emergence of resentment is very difficult. It is much more difficult than an infected person or even a thief. It has only happened 3 times in human history. The last time Meteor Street was near the city, it only appeared once. Now it has appeared again. This frequency is too high. Yes. Richard told Yorkshire what happened. Are you sure it's really resolved? 35 sure. The medium has been destroyed by me, Richard said. That's good. Yorkshire breathed a sigh of relief. Richard hung up the phone. Nasra came over. Richard, finish the call. It's over. Then let's go. Where? Go to another manor. This manor, I don't want to stay for a moment. Nasla said, I plan to permanently ban this manor, and the other manor is also in this city. Not very far. Good. 95, Richard nodded. The media has been destroyed, and the manor is sure to be fine. But this happened. Normal people, especially those who have experienced it, will definitely have shadows in their minds. There are a lot fewer people. The estate is smaller. I'm going to quit the gang. Nasla was silent for a while, then said suddenly, after this incident, I realized that power and wealth are not important at all. Family is the most important thing. I don't have many years to live. In the days to come, I want to spend more time with Nyan. 35. Richard, are you willing to take over the Nathra family? Chapter 188, Divination Prophecy, Poems. Nasla's decision surprised Richard. Before, Nasla was still in high spirits and wanted to take the position of the 10 old men. Excuse me. Richard chose to refuse. Richard has no interest in running a gangster family. If interested, Richard can build one himself without taking over the Nathra family. Don't think about it anymore. Don't think about it. All right. Nasra was a little disappointed. Then I'll just hand it over to someone else. Point 35. After you quit, Uncle Nasra, what are your plans? If you don't have any special plans, just quit the gang and become an ordinary person. Maybe you can run a little business. Even if you lose money, it doesn't matter. After all, the money I accumulated before is enough. Then Uncle Nasra, have you thought about another question? What is the problem? Nyan's abilities. Richard said, Nyan's divination ability is sought after by many people. Without the protection of the gang, what do you think those people will do to Nyan? This, Nasla really did not take into account. Because of the resentment, Nasla just wants to live a peaceful life. Sudden, Nasla thought, Richard, can I give Nyan to you? If it was you, no one would dare to do anything to Nyan. The two of you have known each other since childhood. Nyan's abilities must have helped Richard. Follow me. You can, but Uncle Nasra, what you wanted at first was not to cherish the time you spent with Nyan. If you follow me, you may not see Nyan for a long time. It's okay. Nasla shook his head and said, I can't protect Nyan well. Richard, you can do it. Nyan following you will be a more suitable choice, my life. There is not much. But Nyan's, it's just the beginning. Richard nodded. Yes, I can make Neon a part of my team if Neon wants to. 55, just a member of the team? There was an invisible disappointment in Nasra's eyes, but it was quickly hidden again. Then please, the Nasla family, following Nasla's words, disbanded. Because the successor was not a member of the Nasra family, but a foreigner. Nasra obtained a lot of money through this, most of which were deposited in the bank, and a small part was replaced by real estate. And the guards have also been reduced by a few. Similar to Karapika, Basho, and Melody, Nasla can't afford to hire them for a short time, but a long time, Nasla will have no gangsters, and his income will be limited and cannot be supported. In addition, it is not necessary either. Now that Nasra has been determined, has withdrawn from the World Gang, and the transfer of power has been completed, then the World Gang will usually not do anything to Nasra, which is commonly known as the Golden Pot. Many people in the world's gangs have the idea of retirement, so they will maintain this rule. Give yourself multiple ways out. Why is the war between kingdoms usually not killing nobles? It is for this reason. No one can guarantee that he will never fail, and that his family, relatives, and friends will never become captives. There may be some kidnappers who coveted Nathra's wealth, but to deal with these people, it is enough to hire ordinary guards. These guards are relatively cheap. Nyan, what are your thoughts? Nyan looked back at Nathra. I want to go out and see. For so many years, I haven't been able to go out. No matter where I go, there are maids and guards following me. I want to use my legs and my eyes to touch the outside world. So I do. Richard smiled and held out his hand. Then, you're welcome to join. 99 thanks. Richard turned to Northra. Uncle Nasla, I have some things to deal with, so I won't stay here any longer. Bon voyage. Nasra waved his hand. Nyan, be sure to pay attention to safety and email me anytime. Okay, father. Richard left the manor with Nyan and came to the airship square, a coffee shop, where Karapika had been waiting for a long time. The Nasla family was dissolved, and Karapika was immediately unemployed. But this job, for Karapika, is not important at all. Karapika just wants to use this platform to take revenge and collect red eyes. Karaika, are you ready? Anytime. That's good. 35 Richard glanced at Nyan and said, Then Nyan, give Karapika a divination. 35-0. Ask for flowers 0 divination. Karapika frowned slightly. In case, Richard said, the media is too dangerous. No one would have imagined that the matter of Nasla Manor this time, the media of the Kaluta tribe, there have been no problems for so many years. But I don't know if the tragedy of the Kaluta clan will affect the media. Karapika nodded. Nyan closed his eyes. A phantom appeared on Nyan's arm. After that, Nyan's hand started writing on the paper by itself, one sentence after another. Nyan's divination is presented in the form of a prophetic poem. All right. Karapika took the paper sheet. What is written on it? Nyan opened his eyes. Karapika said the above verse. Those who return home will be favored by the elders, and dead spiders will be your nourishment. The world is complicated, and you can only succeed if you look directly at your heart. Both Richard and Karapika looked at Nyan. Divination, it is from Nyan's divination. Even if this is not a poem written by Nyan's own consciousness, but Nyan has seen a lot, so the interpretation of the poem must be more experienced than others. The first two sentences mean that, Karapika, you will benefit from going back this time. The latter means that you may encounter certain dangers this time, but as long as you can look straight into your heart and make the right choice, then you can turn a bad situation into a good one. Karapika nodded. Nyan's explanation was similar to what Karapika had guessed. Richard, don't you divination? Nyan's divination didn't work for me. I tried it before. Richard said, Since Karapika, if you are all right, then I should be fine. I will arrange Nine's place first, and then we will set off. Can I go with you? There will be danger. With your current strength, Nine, it is not suitable. Where am I going then? I will entrust someone to teach you some basic things. To go outside, strength is a must. Richard called Jorn's number and Chapter 189, come and wrestle your wrists. Richard, what's the matter? Senior Pion, I have recruited a new team member because the place I am about to go to is relatively dangerous, and it is not suitable for this newcomer to follow. Is it convenient for you, Senior Pion? Sorry, neither Kalen nor I are at the manor. We are out on a mission now. 99, it's okay, Trouble. Richard's first thought was Jorn, and the friendship between the two was quite good. But if Jorn was not in the manor, but went out, there would be no way. Sudden, Richard thought of another person. Hey, Sky Arena. Maggie frowned slightly when she received Richard's call. Richard, what's the matter? There is a commission. Do you accept it? What commission? A newcomer. I would like to entrust you to help me take care of it. If possible, it would be better to give him some basic training on 083. You should have met this person. Who? Nyan. Maggie's eyes flickered. How long? If it is fast, half a month. If it is slow, it will be a month, and it will not exceed 3 months at most. 35, 1 month, 1 million nuns, I will help you to train. In addition, I want to ask Nyan to help me, Yuvijin, Nabinaga, to do a divination. Can you accept this condition? 5, yes. 99. Okay, then you can send someone here. I'm in the Sky Arena. Richard hung up the phone and went back to the coffee shop. Karaika, how about I take 9 first, and we'll meet in O'Hara. 35 can. O'Hara is the city closest to the former site of the Kaluta tribe. On the airship. Richard, where are we going? 359 go to Sky Arena. Richard said, the place where Kurapika and I are going is really too dangerous for you to go, so I will entrust others to look after you and train you. Come on, I hope next time I see you again, your strength is not the weakest in our team. Richard used a little trick. Definitely not. I will work very hard, very hard. Nyan had no idea what was waiting for her. Training is not that simple, especially hunter's training, and Maggie, a nun from Meteor Street, will be more rigorous in training. Soon, the two arrived at the Sky Arena. With Maggie came Nabinaga and Yuvijin. Yuvijin's resistance to Richard still hasn't gone away. This stubborn idiot still stubbornly believes that Richard caused the division of the brigade. Richard ignored Yuvijin. There is little hope of reasoning with such a person. In that case, Richard didn't waste his time here, and with Yuvijin's current level, he couldn't cause trouble for Richard, and Maggie Nabinaga stopped him. This is Maggie, Richard introduced and said. The person I entrusted you to is her. If you have anything, you could just find her. I have already paid, so you don't need to be polite. 5-9 nodded. Maggie's eyes twitched. Richard looked at Maggie again. My request is normal training. No need to help the seedlings. I hope that when I come back, the Nyan I see is the intact Nyan. Is this okay? No. Then it's a pleasure to work with. Pleasant to work with. The two reached out and shook hands. Sudden, Yuvijin stepped forward. Richard, let's have a fight. Nabinaga quickly stopped in front of Yuvijin. Joke. Only an idiot like Yuvijin didn't know the extent of Richard's strength. Don't say Yuvijin won. Even the 3 of them together are not Richard's opponents. Nabinaga, don't stop me. 99, what's so good about this man? Why are you all turning to him? Yuvijin said dissatisfiedly. It was at the beginning. I don't understand, Maggie. Why do you trust a man you haven't seen a few times before? What he says is what he says. But now it turns out that what Richard said was true, wasn't it? Maggie looked at Yuvijin. Yuvijin froze for a moment. My intuition has always been accurate. You know about this matter? Yuvijin nodded. But when Richard told me about it, I didn't have any signs of a sixth sense. I didn't have a hunch whether it was true or false. Such a thing has never happened. Well, that's only telling a question, because my trust in Krallo overshadows my intuition. But even so, I just kept silent. I gave Krallo a chance to explain, but the explanation given by Krallo disappointed me and disappointed all the members. It was not us who betrayed the brigade, and it was Krallo. Even if Franklin, Kuba, and Shizuku left with Krallo, do you think they really have no idea? Do you think they really trusted Krallo to leave with Krallo? 99 Yuvigin fell silent. It's not that he doesn't know about this, but he doesn't want to accept it. Deep down, Yuvigin blocked this result. Yuvigin wants the brigade to go back to the past. It was a very happy time for Yuvigin. Let me have a match with you. Richard's voice sounded. Yuvigin looked up suddenly. Real? Richard said, in the real battle, you are definitely not my opponent. Then, let's try the items you are good at. You are an enhancer-capable person, and you are especially confident in wrist strength. Then let's wrestle. There was a look of disbelief on Yuvigin's face. Wrestle with me? Yes, don't you dare. How could it be possible? How could I dare not? I just don't believe that you would be so obsessive that you don't compete with me on your own strengths, but on your own weaknesses. 5 Richard smiled. It's not my fault. Come on. 5.0 The two went outside. Stand on either side of the stone. After that, the two put their hands on the stone and clenched tightly. Start. Yuvigin pushed hard. In Yuvigin's opinion, Richard can be beaten with just one tap, like he did in Phantom Troop. Even Finks, the second in arm strength. Yuvigin beat Finks in arm wrestling without much effort. Yuvigin is a nun that points all the points on the basic attributes. However, when Yuvigin was exerting force, he suddenly discovered that there was a completely opposite force coming from the opposite side. Compared with the strength of his own arm, this force was not even inferior. A look of shock appeared on Yuvigin's face. You're not an enhancer. Why are you so powerful? Chapter 190. The information leaker of the Luda tribe in the cave. Boom. Richard pressed down hard. The back of Yuvigin's hand slammed heavily on the stone. Shock also flashed in Nobinaga and Maggie's eyes. The power of Yuvigin, they know it. They admit that Richard is strong. However, according to their observations, either Richard is a manipulator-capable person or Richard is a trait-capable person, neither of which is particularly good at arm strength. But now, Richard is Yuvigin who defeated Enhancer. Yuvigin's face was full of disbelief. This is impossible. Impossible? Do you want to do it again? Come again. Yuvigin gritted his teeth. This time, Yuvigin used stronger power, and a powerful momentum burst out from Yuvigin's body. Yuvigin entered a state of entanglement. However, the result is still the same. Boom! The back of Yuvigin's hand hit the stone hard again. Come again. Bang! 35 I lost. Yuvigin was hit, and the whole person seemed to fall into autism. Yuvigin is absolutely confident in his wrist strength. Now, this most confident direction of 09 was destroyed by Richard. Richard withdrew his hand. Absorbing the power of the infected person and the power of the medium will have a certain impact on the physique. Before going to Yukexin, Richard's defense had already reached the level of Yuvigin. There will be a little less power, but not much. And now, Richard has absorbed the power of the medium in Krallo's hand, as well as the magician's card in the tarot. Richard's power is already above Yuvigin. The reason for wrestling with Yuvigin was that Richard wanted to test his strength. Maggie, now I will ask you, it is good. Maggie came to her senses. Maggie and Nobinaga couldn't believe Yuvigin's defeat to Richard. Why is your power so strong? Yuvigin looked up, staring at Richard. Who knows? Richard did not answer Yuvigin's question. The fact that he can absorb the power of the media is a secret. It is a secret that no one can tell, even those closest to Richard. Not to mention Yuvigin. Bye. Goodbye. Nobinaga walked over to Yuvigin. Yuvigin, are you all right? I'm fine. Yuvigin's expression suddenly became serious. I decided, next, I must train hard. My strength must go to another level. Next time I see Richard, I must beat him. Come on. Nobinaga didn't blow Yuvigin's confidence. But honestly, Nobinaga doesn't think Yuvigin can do it. Richard's information, which Nobinaga has learned a bit about. The time to be a nun is not very long, mainly because of the rapid progress. Let's go back. Watching Richard's disappearing back, Maggie said. Good. 35 the 4 of them walked towards the Sky Arena. The 3 of Maki had already reached the 200th floor, but Nyan did not, so Nyan could only stay in the Sky Arena during the day as a spectator tourist, and at night, he needed to return to the hotel to rest. Richard remembered something. That is, the tarot card in Nyan's hand is actually more than one. From the Fool, to the end of the world. Major Arcana, a total of 22 cards. And the Magician is just one of them. After the grievances caused by the medium of the Magician were lifted, Richard tried to find another 21 Major Arcana cards, but to no avail. The 21 cards seemed to have disappeared. This made Richard a little concerned. I don't know if the other 21 cards are also mediums. If they are mediums, then the situation may be very bad, and pure mediums will not leave on their own. 99, unless it was acquired or it turned into resentment. Both of these are not good situations. If someone gets it, there's a high probability that this person will become an infected person, and complaining will be more troublesome. Hunter Association. Yorkshire frowned and looked across. President, don't you think there's a problem? For a long time before, there have only been 3 complaints. And now, in less than half a year, it has appeared twice, and there are monsters that are similar to the combination of frogs and humans. There are dozens of monsters that have been discovered, and I don't know if there are any hidden ones. Netero's eyes were half closed, as if asleep. President. Yorkshire increased his voice. Netero just opened his eyes. It's little Yorkshire. Don't worry too much about resentment. It's useless to worry. If it happens, it's resolved. President, what I'm worried about is whether there will be any changes on the Dark Continent. After all, the medium only appears because of those creatures in the Dark Continent. Will not. Netero shook his head. There's nothing to worry about for the time being. All right. After Yorkshire left, Netero looked out the window. A sad look appeared between his brows. Netero wasn't as indifferent to these things as he had just shown in front of Yorkshire. Instead, Netero wants to keep the Hunter Protocol's heart steady. It can't be that before the opponent has really hit the door, his own people will be in chaos first. Can't wait long. Almost, it's time to start planning. Netero sighed. Richard arrives in O'Hara. Kurapika has been waiting here for 2 days. Richard went to the Sky Arena and spent a lot of time. Because it's not right. Let's go 083. I've already bought the supplies. Richard nodded. Walk aside. By the way, Kurapika, do you remember the suffering of the Cthulhu people back then? Remember. 99. Kurapika was silent for a while, then said, It's my fault. 55. That person back then, I shouldn't have saved her. 99. The address of the Cthulhu people is very secret, and people outside can't find it at all. Only the village chief has a mobile phone and can contact the outside world. There is no possibility of any information leakage. Only that person is an exception. Paolo and I rescued her in the forest, healed her, and sent her away. Shortly after she left, the Cthulhu suffered that kind of catastrophe. It must be the news she leaked. This person I will never forgive. If I want to see her, I must kill her and avenge the clan. Richard recalled for a moment that he seemed to have heard of such a plot. What's that person's name? Sheila. She told me that she is a hunter. Part of the purpose of taking the hunter exam is to improve my strength and facilitate access to information. And the other part is to find this person. Then do you have any clues now? No. Maybe she's changed her name, or maybe the one she gave us at that time was a fake name. A look of hatred flashed in Kurapika's eyes. Chapter 191, Let's wait and see at night. The two walked quickly through the forest. The old site of the Cthulhu people is very remote and secret. Normal people don't come to such places at all. The trees are getting taller and denser. At the same time, the dangerous atmosphere has become more and more. The predators in the jungle are serious about any creature that enters the territory. Even a sudden attack. Call out. A snake hidden in the shadows found his letter to Richard. Richard flicked his fingers and flicked. Bang! 35. Suddenly, the whole head of the snake exploded. Too weak. Coming. Kurapika's expression became slightly subtle. Kurapika has left since the Kuruda tribe was exterminated. Year by year, Kurapika keeps practicing to improve his strength, in order to one day defeat the Phantom Troop and take back all the Red Eyes. After that, go back to your hometown. Neither of Kurapika's goals has been accomplished yet. Phantom Troop. Kurapika only captured Shalnok once. No one was killed. And with flaming eyes, Kurapika just got one team. Bought it with Nasra's money. Only later Nasra gave Kurapika. Everyone, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to avenge you. and I haven't been able to bring your eyes back." Kurapika lowered her head. Richard looked up. "In front of you is a swamp. Through this swamp, you can reach Kurapika's hometown, the former site of the Karuta tribe, which, according to Kurapika's description, is a very beautiful valley. Now, it may still be beautiful, but there's a little more silence. The blood of death soaked into the soil. Let's go." Richard patted Kurapika on the shoulder. Kurapika nodded. The two stepped into the swamp, one step at a time. For ordinary people, such a swamp would not be able to pass through. The air in the swamp was so turbid that it was difficult to breathe. If you take a wrong step, you may fall into the swamp, sinking little by little, and the whole person may disappear into the swamp. There are also various creatures. Ferocious beasts, poisonous insects. That's why the Kaluta people choose this place, because really no one would go to such a place. But for Richard and Kurapika, it was nothing. The former Kalutas can pass through. The current Richard and Kurapika are not weaker than those people. After all, they all died at the hands of Phantom Troop. And Richard and Kurapika can beat Phantom Troop. Arrive. The two stopped. Behind the two, many corpses appeared. Snakes, crocodiles. Both were alerted by Richard and Kurapika and wanted to attack them. But the result was killed by two people. "Go through here, and you can get to that valley." 55. Richard nodded. The two walked along the narrow passage. A valley came into Richard's sight, and Kurapika was not exaggerating. It was beautiful indeed, even if it has been abandoned for a few years. But it still looks like a few years ago. It's like a paradise. Very beautiful. "Thanks." A gleam of pain flashed in Kurapika's eyes, but she hid it again. "This is where our Kaluta people live, where I was born and grew up." 55. Our village would still be fine without the Phantom Troop. The village grandpa, Pero, father, mother, and everyone can live well. Richard took a look. "Tell me about the history of your Kaluta people and the activities that you will carry out that are exclusive to your village, especially the sacrificial type." 55. From Kralo's mouth, Richard has determined that the source of the power of the Kaluta clan, the source of the flaming eyes, is the medium, which Kralo himself admitted. And Kurapika has red eyes without losing her sense of self. It must be a thief. Richard emphasized sacrifice because it was a likely way of stealing. In a sense, cult believers can be regarded as a kind of petty thieves. Although the power they steal is not much, they can indeed gain a lot of enhancements. The way they use it is to sacrifice. Good. 99. Kurapika spoke slowly. Richard listened carefully. But until he finished listening, including the history of the Kaluta people and all the ritualistic things about the Kaluta people, Richard didn't hear anything strange or characteristic. Very common. The so-called sacrificial ceremony is just a group of people gathered together to sing poetry. But poetry cannot be the medium. The medium must have substance, something that actually exists. I'll go see for myself. Richard stood up. It is good. Kurapika did not block. Kurapika probably understands what Richard is going to do. After going through the Nasla manor, Nasla already knows what kind of hunter Richard is, the medium hunter. The main purpose is to investigate and destroy the media. This is a character set created by Richard. Richard will not reveal his real purpose, which is to absorb the power of the medium. Came here to find and destroy the medium of the Kaluta tribe. Kurapika doesn't feel anything about this. Even the power of Kurapika's flaming eyes is likely to come from this medium. However, Kurapika hated the medium more than he liked it. Kurapika felt that without this medium, the Kaluta tribe would not suffer the fate of genocide and would have no power, but as long as they could live in peace and stability, it would be better than anything else. Strength not only brought help to the Kaluta tribe, also brought disaster. And last time, the incident at Nasla Manor made Kurapika even less fond of the media. Possibly from the medium, it is possible to gain power and become a thief. But what if instead of becoming a thief, he became an infected person? All consciousness is purged and reduced to a puppet of the medium. It's like he's actually dead, and it will endanger others. The media is a good money disaster. Kurapika supports this thing that destroys the medium. The valley is not very big, and dozens of cabins are scattered. The blood on the ground has long since disappeared. The body of Karapika has also been buried. But Richard could still feel that desolate aura, the breath of death, floating in this valley. Richard, how? Did you find anything? 35, no. Richard shook his head and walked in a circle, finding nothing. Karika, are you sure there's nothing else special about your village? No. Karapika said, I have already told you everything I know. Even the content in the village chief grandpa's notebook is only what he can read. Karika, I'm just asking, nothing else. It's okay. 99. Richard looked up at the sky. Then let's wait and see at night. Chapter 192 is fake. It's all fake into the night. Richard didn't find anything that looked like a medium during the day. I want to see if this valley will change at night. Karapika returned to his log cabin. Richard does the same. The two sat opposite each other, and Karapika took out food and water from the package. Richard, could it be that Cthulhu has taken the medium of the Cthulhu and told Hisoka a lie? Uncertain. Richard shook his head and said, but the possibility is relatively small, unless the help that this medium brings to Cthulhu is greater than the whole Phantom Troop. 39. Otherwise, if he took out this medium at that time, it would be possible to prevent the brigade from splitting. This is what Richard said to Karapika, and in reality, Richard knew Cthulhu didn't get that medium. This is information from Shaunark's memory. Of course, there is also the possibility that Cthulhu cheated on Shaunark, but this possibility is relatively small. Karapika was silent for a while. Richard, do you know what kind of place Meteor Street is? Are you interested in this? Karapika nodded. Richard said, since you're interested in Meteor Street, I won't talk about the information on the bright side. I think you have already investigated it yourself, so I will talk about 083 and the rest. The first is the relationship between Meteor Street and the World Gang. There is cooperation between the two, but there is also competition. The world's gangsters want to suppress the strength of Meteor Street in order to gain greater benefits. Meteor Street wants to get rid of the control of the world's gangsters and be the master of the house. Similar to colonies and colonizers, but not so much. The second is Meteor Street. It's really messy. Most of the place is messy. It's the garbage dump of the world. It's full of garbage and it stinks. The life inside is quite worthless. Richard paused. I had a few dealings with Maggie in Phantom Troop, and she told me that the original intention of the brigade was not to commit crimes, but to revive Meteor Street and make Meteor Street no longer a garbage dump. Change Meteor Street and make Meteor Street a place where ordinary people can live. For that, she needs money. You can kill for money. For money, one can bear sin. So, when Cthulhu shows selfishness, the brigade will split. They are not loyal to Cthulhu, but to revive Meteor Street and this goal and bring them together. A moment of loss appeared in Karapika's eyes. Is that so? Of course, Richard said. No matter what their starting point, what the reason is, they can't change what they have done. Crime, then there is no excuse. 5. Karapika lowered her head. Yes, but even more hateful is Cthulhu, who made the decision to attack the Cthulhu tribe. Richard glanced at Karapika. Karika, let me ask you a question. What would you do if all the people in Phantom Troop had no resistance and stood in front of you now? How would you deal with them? Karapika hesitated. I have nothing to do with them. No matter what decision you make, it has nothing to do with me. Karapika, just say it according to your own heart. You know the principle of what I do. Karapika nodded. I'll kill Cthulhu. 5, because he's the culprit. As for the others, I want them to be punished. And I can comfort myself by saying that they are just tools in Cthulhu's hands. But they are people, not tools. It's a living person, a person with flesh and blood, just like my people. So I want them to pay the price. 39. Karapika looked at Richard. Richard, what about you? What would you do if you were in my place? Richard shook his head. If this is the case, don't say it. Richard's approach is different from Karapika. Karapika did not say that he would kill the ordinary members of the Phantom Troop, but in truth, he meant to let them go. This was not what Richard expected. Ajfa. After all, in the plot, Karapika also said such a sentence. Revenge, I will avenge, but I will not break my own bottom line because of revenge. But for Richard, those who killed their own family members, no matter what the other party had, Richard would not let them go. I'll go out and see. Richard glanced outside. The sky was completely dark. No moonlight, just a little starlight. It is good. Richard walked out of the cabin. From start to finish, go again. Got nothing. Richard, how is it? Still none. Richard shook his head. Let's rest and see the situation tomorrow. The two went into their respective rooms. The wooden house has been uninhabited for several years, but it is still solid. There may be a lot of mosquitoes and the like. However, when Richard released his own breath, the mosquitoes would not be a problem. These mosquitoes could not even get close to Richard. This was the difference between none and ordinary people. Richard closed his eyes. Little by little, I fell into sleep. Into the dream. A picture unfolded in front of Richard. It's still the valley, but there seems to be something different from what Richard saw during the day. The next day, Richard opened his eyes. Looking out the window, he seemed to feel that something was wrong. But where exactly? Feel it. Richard shook his head and walked out. Opposite Kurapika out. The two had breakfast. Richard searched the valley again, but found nothing. Day 3. Richard gave up temporarily. Richard is certain that the Coludas do have a medium, but if he can't find it, there is no way. The entire valley has been rummaged several times by Richard. Richard couldn't spend all his time here. In contrast, Richard is also very interested in the thing called the dark room in the World Gangster. Karaika, I'm leaving. How about you? I want to stay a little longer. It is good. Richard walked out of the valley and came to a nearby city. After that, he took the airship to the Sky Arena, took Nyan from Maggie's hand, and went to Ukexon. Using the Greed Island client, and Nyan entered the Greed Island. The two quickly contacted Hua, Sherdolong, and Betty who entered the game earlier. Later, I met Hisoka again. Richard has a message from Hisoka, a member of the Phantom Troop, who is looking for a savior in the game of Greed Island. This moment, Richard's eyes widened suddenly, because, in this world, Krallo doesn't need to be removed at all. Kurapika didn't put constraints on Krallo at all. It's fake. I'm in a hallucination. Chapter 193, Multiple Dreams. Richard's heart tightened. The world line of this world, in Richard's memory, is divided into two. One is the original plot. Kurapika killed Uvijin. Paikinaton committed suicide. Krallo was restrained by Kurapika, and the members of the brigade searched for a slayer on the Isle of Greed. The second line is the world line that changed because of Richard's arrival. Shalnark was captured, Paikinaton died, and the brigade split. In this second world line, there is absolutely no plot where Krallo needs to be removed, because Kurapika has no chance to set restrictions on Krallo. It's all fake. I've fallen into an illusion. But when did it start? Richard thought back carefully. Little by little memories. Sudden, Richard opened his eyes sharply. He looked around quickly, only to realize that he was still in the valley of the Kaluta tribe, still in the wooden house, and he was lying on the bed at the moment. Richard frowned and looked outside. Not a fantasy, but a dream? Richard walked out of the room. Kurapika came out of another room. Richard, did you find any clues last night? No, let's take a look today. Richard put away his doubts. Once, twice, until 3 days passed. Richard gave up again and chose to leave temporarily. This time, Richard still planned to go to the Sky Arena to bring Nyan back, but recalling the dream last time, Richard hesitated and instead called Pence first. Richard went to where Pence was. The two returned to the Sky Arena, bring Nyan, and come to Ukexon again. Richard and Pence enter the Island of Greed, and Nyan guards it outside. In the Island of Greed, Richard met the bomber, Gon, Biscuit, and others. Gon, like in the original book, defeated the bomber, and then spared the life of the bomber and others. No, still not right. 33. Richard frowned as he looked at the picture of the 3 explosion demons still alive. These explosion demons have had conflicts with me before, with my character. It is impossible for them to live, and in my values, these 3 people are damned. I can't possibly save the life of the exploding demon just to make Gon and Killua level up. Very wrong. Did I fall into an illusion again, or a dream? Richard's heart tightened, and at this moment, Richard suddenly opened his eyes again. I returned to the cave skull pagoda valley and back to the wooden house. Double dream. Richard's face darkened. Moreover, it's very likely that it's not just double, but how much it weighs, I can't be sure right now. And even as long as I don't find a key to breaking this dream, I'll be stuck here forever. More terrifying than ordinary fantasy. 99. As soon as I realized something was wrong, the dream would restart. Once, twice, 3 times, I can hardly tell the difference between reality and dream. Richard left the cave skull pagoda valley again. This time, Richard made a different choice. After half a month, Richard felt something was wrong again. So the dream was broken. Richard opened his eyes and returned to the cave skull pagoda valley. There is no need to leave the valley anymore. The key to solving this circular dream must be in this valley. I must find it. Otherwise, I will never be able to break free from this circular dream. Karapika came out from the opposite side. Richard, good morning. 35 Richard didn't hesitate and shot directly. A dodging came to Karapika. After that, a hand knife. Boom. Richard, what are you doing? Karapika's eyes widened. With an expression of disbelief, she fell softly to the ground. Richard had a vague guess in his heart. According to Nyan's prophecy, Karapika will go through a test when he returns this time, and if he passes the test, he will gain benefits and his strength will be greatly improved. Then, according to Richard's speculation, it is likely that this medium, or something controlled by this medium, also has some relationship with Karapika. Richard attacked Karapika in his dream and wanted to use this to provoke the thing behind him. Since it's a dream, it doesn't matter what I do to Karapika now. Richard tied Karapika to a post. Torture was then used against Karapika. Everything Richard could think of, he used it on Karapika. Sudden. Richard felt a wave. Very weak. 0. Seeking flowers, but it does exist. Next moment, Richard had a feeling of being out of dream. Open one's eyes. Richard found himself back in bed, lying in bed. Dreamland restarted. Richard gave a smile. I guessed right. It's not a grudge, but something else. 35. I realize that when something is not right, I can break the dream. The stimulation of the person who created the dream can also break the dream. Richard looked out the window. Then I'll see if you can't stand it. Since this is my dream, no matter what I imagine, it's okay. Richard closed his eyes. Open again. Suddenly, there was a loud noise outside. Is the sound of battle. Just saw. Phantom troop appeared. And the people of the Cthulhu tribe were also resurrected. The two sides fought. In Richard's imagination, it turned into a crushing battle. According to Yuvajin, it was a difficult battle, but Richard didn't want to imagine it that way. Richard just wanted to irritate the man who created the multiple dreams. Then the Cthulhu people must be demeaned. You want to torture me with multiple dreams? But now, this dream is tormenting you, not me. If you want to see, I'll let you see enough. Richard continued to imagine. In the dream, the encounter of the Cthulhu tribe became more and more tragic. Richard could feel a surge of anger that seemed to be brewing. Not a dream, but from outside the dream. Angry, this is just the beginning. Richard chuckled lightly. So the Cthulhu tribe in Richard's dream became even more unbearable. Not just fail, be defeated, and they were humiliated in character. Whether it is an old man or a child, whether it is a man or a woman. Richard is to stimulate this multiple dream maker. Finally, enough. A voice entered Richard's head. Everything around is broken. The scene in front of Richard's eyes receded like water at a low tide and disappeared. Chapter 194. The Infected with Thinking subscription. Richard walked out of the room again. This time, Richard could feel that it was completely different from the previous times. This time it's reality, no longer a dream. Richard came to Karapika's door. Opened the door, but there's nothing inside. Karapika is not there. Richard frowned and stepped forward. The bed was still warm, and Karapika was clearly lying there just now. Sudden, an extremely dangerous breath fell on Richard. Richard stepped back, just saw a figure and slammed into it with an extremely violent momentum. Crack! The walls of the wooden house were directly broken. Richard stepped back again. Boom! The hut collapsed. Only then did Richard see the person in front of him clearly. Is an old man. but the face is very blurred, and the face above seems to be constantly changing. On the body 083, there are also many traces of patchwork. It's not like a person, and like a lot of people, force the suture again, similar to hatred. Oh, the old man's throat uttered like a beast. Infected. 99 Richard's expression froze. There are many derivatives of the medium. Resentment is undoubtedly the most powerful, but to deal with, resentment is not necessarily the most difficult to deal with, because resentment follows certain rules. As long as you find this rule, you can avoid being killed by resentment. Just like what happened at Nosla Manor last time. Find a magic rule. Find the escape rule of Rose. Buy Richard a lot of time. In the infected, the power is not as strong as resentment. But the actions of the infected do not follow the rules, and the infected have their own thoughts. However, according to what Pion and I said, the thinking of the infected person is reborn and has nothing to do with the body. But this infected person seems to have feelings for the Cthulhu tribe. That's weird. The two teammates of Jorn have no feelings for Jorn. Richard became vigilant in his heart. A thinking existence, even if the power is not so strong, but the difficulty of dealing with it may be even higher. Cobweb. A recorder appeared in Richard's hands. Next moment, a group of reciting nets shot at the old man. When approaching the old man, it suddenly became bigger and bound the old man. Tear. But the power of the old man is amazing. Shred the cobweb directly. This is no ordinary cobweb. The strength of this spider web has reached the B level. Even Piorn needs to use none to corrode the spider web. The old man in front of him was torn to pieces with his strength. This power is no worse than Yuvigen. Richard continued to distance lay. Mental pollution memory bomb. For infected people, the effect of mental pollution will be much worse. Usually, infected people have high resistance in this regard, but Richard still intends to try it. If you can't succeed, it's nothing. If you can succeed, it's a surprise. The old man was just stunned for a moment and quickly broke free. Outlander die. Richard's eyes met the old man. The picture scroll can't be used now, the arrogant story, and the cost of using it is too high. Then try me in this. 35 Richard's eyes changed color. I have angry. After that, black silk threads grew out of the old man's body at a speed visible to the naked eye. The black silk threads used the old man's anger and ki as nutrients and continued to grow. The more angry you are, the faster you grow. All lines are under Richard's control, obstructing the old man's actions. The Cthulhu people are trash. Damn you, a bunch of trash. Rubbish. The people of Phantom Troop killed well. I will kill Kurapika. Let you Cthulhu be extinct. Richard stimulated the infected person with his words. Richard didn't know why the infected person had feelings for the Cthulhu tribe, but since he cared about the Cthulhu tribe, Richard could use this to stimulate the other party. The old man became more and more angry, roaring and burning, like a flame burning at a glance. Angry, crazy, hysteria. And with the old man's anger, the black silk threads on the old man's body also grew longer and more lush, continuously winding and shrinking. Squeeze into the skin of the old man, even in the flesh. Densely packed, so that the old man now looks very scary. Some green juice seeped out from the old man's skin wound. Because of the interference of these black silk threads, the old man's actions became more and more clumsy, slow, and slow. Richard is satisfied with the result. The strength of the old man is very strong. Even in the B grade, they could be ranked in the top 0. Against Krallo, Hisoka, neither will be at a disadvantage. Of course, this is the strength on the bright side. But in terms of fighting wisdom, this old man does not seem to be very strong. Otherwise, it would not have been so long, and he would not have realized that the black silk thread, related to his own anger, would not allow those black silk threads to grow to this extent. Richard stopped. Those lines have completely bound the old man. Even the action becomes difficult. The effect of the eye of anger is better than I imagined. The anger that devours the other party grows, and its length and tenacity are closely related to the other party's anger and breath. As long as the opponent doesn't hide any trump cards, the battle can basically end with this. Richard looked at the old man. You are thinking, can you talk about it? 39 ho. The old man glared at Richard. Outlander die. Thick hatred filled the eyes of the old man. Richard controls the black silk thread, further increasing the contraction force. Sudden, a red light appeared on the old man. Then the ground shook. Richard stepped back quickly. It is to see that groups of black air overflow from the ground. Strong malice, hatred, overflowed from the black air. After that, these black key violently rushed towards the old man. Richard's expression froze. Great! The black silk thread wrapped around the old man's neck. Crack! 5.0 The old man's neck is broken. A large amount of green juice came out of the wound. However, as the black key entered, the old man's head grew out abruptly. A head fell to the ground. Another head grew. Overdrive regeneration? 99. Can you grow back even if your head falls off? 35. Richard knew that the ability of the infected was very strange, but the scene in front of him still surprised Richard. The aura of the old man became stronger and stronger. In Richard's hands, a storybook has appeared, because the strength of the old man has exceeded Richard's expectations. The scroll can't be used. The effect of the Eye of Wrath is probably not very good. Then, all Richard could rely on was the arrogant story. This Richard needs the ability to pay the most. It is also Richard's strongest ability at the moment. Richard opened the storybook in his hand. Chapter 195 Dead monsters are good monsters collapse. The old man grabbed the black thread on his body and pulled it abruptly. Immediately, countless threads were broken. However, some of them were too closely connected to the skin of the old man, so the skin of the old man was actually torn off, turning into a bloody patch. It's just that this blood is not red, but dark green. A burst of extremely tyrannical momentum appeared on the old man's body. In an instant, the figure of the old man came to Richard. Boom! One punch. Richard raised an arm and blocked it in front of him. Boom! A huge crash sounded. Richard's figure flew out backwards. Crack! The bone of the forearm was directly broken. One can imagine how powerful this power is. Richard's strength and defense are stronger than Yuvigin. In other words, if the old man's opponent was Yuvigin, then Yuvigin would only end up being beaten to death by the old man. It can be seen from this that the power of the medium is indeed extraordinary. 09 The body of the old man belongs to the deceased of the Cthulhu tribe. He was killed by the people of Phantom Troop in his lifetime. But now, with the help of the media, he became an infected person, and his strength immediately surpassed that of Phantom Troop. But Richard is different from Yuvigin. Richard has more than just power. Richard is a trait-based ability user. A pride story. Reading done. The moment Richard closed the book, Richard's momentum changed. Little by little, condensed, strengthened. The air around him seemed to be heavy. Crack! A gap appeared on the ground where Richard was standing, caused by the pressure of Richard's aura. Since you don't want to talk, then I can only kill you. Richard kicked. Boom! The ground sank, and the huge recoil force gave Richard extremely fast speed. It is only faster than the speed shown by the old man before. Richard's fist landed heavily on the old man's chest. Crack! There was a sound of broken bones. The old man flew out. Richard's figure followed closely. A series of attacks. Bang! Boom! Boom! 95 in an instant. The two have fought countless rounds. No other abilities are used. Simply relying on fighting skills to fight. The only one Richard uses is the stream. Because that's enough. The story of arrogance brings a tenfold increase in power. Richard's ability was unable to restrain the old man, so he simply used his fists. The more the ability is used, the more ki is actually consumed. If it doesn't work, then don't use it at all. The real powerhouse will first take a low-cost method to test the enemy, find a way to restrain the opponent, and then use this method to fight the opponent. This is the way most people take it. Of course, there are those who use their strongest attack from the very beginning, but doing so is risky. The stronger the move, the more ki it consumes. If it doesn't work, then you will be at a disadvantage instead. It's like gambling. To give a simple example, if Richard forcibly played a crazy sonata in the face of an old man with a high resistance to mental pollution, Richard would consume a lot of ki, but he would not be able to cause harm to the old man. Then, the one who is at a disadvantage will be Richard. Green juice splashed out. A stench drifted in the air. Richard already has the upper hand. Kill this old man. Almost, I can get the medium. 99, it's not far. Richard glanced at the old man across from him. Dangerous this time. Even if the old man is just an infected person, not resentment, not so strong. But the ability of the old man is very strong. Trapped in endless dreams. If Richard didn't feel that the infected person was close to the situation of the Cthulhu people, he used his own imagination to create a lot of scenes of the Cthulhu people being humiliated for the old man. Infinite dreams may never end. It was the infected person himself who voluntarily gave up the most effective method for him. It's time to end you completely. 35 Richard concentrated his ki on his fist. Nearly 80% or more. That's a pretty scary number. After all, Richard's current strength is 10 times that of his usual state. In normal state, Richard's level has already reached B+. Go to hell. Richard raised his fist and slammed into the old man's body. Not the head, not the heart, but the entire torso. The whole body of the old man was smashed with one punch. Bang! 35, the sound of bones breaking, muscles tearing, blood vessels exploding. All exploded at this moment. The old man is like a leaky sieve. Buzz. 35, the whole body softened. All the bones were broken. This old man has no possibility of standing up anymore. Richard withdrew his fist. Ended. After that, Richard will record the flute and touch the old man. Memory read. This is none from Pykenaton. A mass of thoughts of death fell in front of Richard. Pykenaton, have you got the information from the media? Pykenaton just nodded. Sudden, the old man on the ground has changed. The green liquid in the body continued to flow out, emitting a foul smell, and it was also strongly corrosive, and even the ground was corroded. The muscles, flesh, and hair of the old man melted away little by little, until it turned into a pool of green water. Like some 083 vomit. At this moment, the vomit is constantly changing its shape. Isn't this still dead? Richard thought for a moment. Condensed ki on the fist again. One punch. The vomit change is over. It turned into a face, a small, bamboo-like body with a big head. The head is densely packed, and all are eyes. Fiery red eyes. Hiss. The monster pounced on Richard's fist. Grab Richard's fist. After that, the mouth of the blood basin opened wide. Take a bite. Richard swung down sharply. The monster fell to the ground, but in an instant, it stabilized and rushed towards Richard again. Countless eyes flickered. It looks terrifying and intimidating. It's really endless. 35 Richard gave birth to his hands and grabbed the monster with one hand. After that, he concentrated all his energy in his hands. Hard. Squeeze hard. Hard could be used not only for defense, but also for attack. Just heard a pop. The monster exploded. Abruptly, crushed and burst. Just like a balloon. Countless things splashed out from it. It turned green juice again. But this time, it was juice without power. The monster is completely dead. The feeling that made Richard uncomfortable gradually disappeared. Chapter 196, Pictures of Mountains and Rivers. Pike Noten. Say it again, I didn't catch it. 99, it's this valley. Richard frowned. You mean that medium, the whole valley? Yes, I read this information from the memory of this monster. Richard nodded. Pykenaton returned to the recorder. When Richard thought about it, the recorder disappeared. After that, Richard looked towards the valley. I didn't expect that there would be such a large medium. No wonder I couldn't find it no matter how I looked. I always thought that the medium was small things, dark sonatas, crystal balls, bell tower carvings, tarot cards. These are all small things. It was me who fell into the misunderstanding of thinking. I didn't expect it to be a whole valley. If that's the case, then it's fine. Richard came to the very center of the valley. After that, pat the ground. A burst of force emerged from Richard's hand and extended towards the ground. The scene in front of Richard slowly changed. It is still a valley, but there are many more people in the valley. Vibrant, like a paradise. However, Richard could vaguely see that in the sky, A pair of huge eyes seemed to be looking down. When Richard appeared, there was anger in these eyes. Heavy pressure fell on Richard. Crack! But at this moment, the ground cracked a gap. Countless seawater gushed out from it. The entire valley was submerged, a tentacle fluttering with the sea. Those eyes in the sky closed reluctantly. The scene in front of Richard returned to normal. The valley disappeared, became a flat ground. Because the terrain is lower than the swamp, the silt and water in the swamp slowly flowed over here, submerging it, swallowing it, and turning it into a swamp. Richard took out his recorder. Strengthened tongue. A phantom swept towards Karapika. After that, Richard left quickly with Karapika. Through the swamp, into the forest. Karapika didn't wake up. Richard took Karapika out of the forest, came to a nearby town, entered the hotel, opened 2 rooms, threw Karapika in one of them, and immediately entered the other one. Because Richard couldn't wait to see something. Picture scroll. When Richard thought about it, the picture of greed appeared in Richard's hands. However, it can no longer be called a picture of greed. Instead, it should be called a painting of mountains and rivers. Inside the real world, as Richard knows, in mythology, there's something called the Shana Shejitu. Richard hung the scroll on the wall and stepped in. Next moment, Richard's figure has already entered the picture scroll. In front of you is a valley. There was a vast expanse of white around, and it was impossible to step in. The space for this picture scroll is currently only so large. The valley was created by absorbing the medium of the Kaluta people. In a valley, there are only 2 buildings. One is a bell tower and the other is a temple. The ground is bare, without any vegetation. Richard looked around for a week and nodded in satisfaction. After this valley appeared, the world in the picture became much bigger, like a small village. As long as it can be planted here, it will not be difficult to live here for the rest of your life. Richard entered the temple, straight to the backyard. A touch of emerald green entered Richard's sight. Richard's eyes lit up. Success. Sure enough, it can be planted. 35. My thinking is correct. It can be considered a real world here. 55. Richard came to the ground and then dug out a potato seedling. A newly grown potato appeared in Richard's sight. It is indeed possible to grow here, and it's growing well. However, these crops alone are not enough. I can get more plants in, even animals. Richard went downstairs, went to a nearby market, and found a seller of saplings. Richard gave a rough description of the climate in the valley. I need plants that are suitable for this environment. The more the better, the price is not an issue. 99. In addition to the price of the saplings, I will give you an additional 300,000 rennies. For Richard, 300,000 ringgits is nothing. Time is more important. If Richard wanted efficiency, he could only exchange it for money. Otherwise, the other party would not be interested at all and waste a few days. For Richard, it was undoubtedly more serious than wasting 300,000 yuan. If Richard wants to make 300,000 rennies, he doesn't need a whole day. Hearing this, the hawker immediately became enthusiastic. No problem, guest. If you need it, I'll bring it to you right away. Okay, then I'll wait here. Richard sat in the original position of the hawker, and the hawker directly gave up today's business for the commission. Occasionally, someone passing by and seeing Richard felt a little strange. Richard is a bit out of tune with this market. After half a day, the hawker came back. A car followed behind. Hello, guest. Everything I can find is here. If you can wait here for 2 more days, I can find some more, but it won't be much. No, these are enough. Richard glanced at it. The carriage was full, and the number of saplings reached several hundred. The vendor took out 2 more bags. There are basic fertilizers that can be used after planting, which is very helpful for the growth of saplings. Inside this bag are some books on the precautions for cultivating these trees. Good. Richard nodded. This hawker is very thoughtful. I'll buy this car too. How much? Do you want a car too? With so many saplings, it's inconvenient to not have a car. Does this car have any special significance? No. Then make an offer, I'll pay. Yes. Money is good. The hawker quickly quoted a price. Richard looked at the hawker's eyes and made sure that the price quoted by the hawker would be a little expensive, but Richard didn't care too much. He wanted in a hurry, and the other party would increase the price, which was normal. It's just a little thing. Richard doesn't care. After paying, Richard drove out of the market. After that, he drove directly out of the city. After realizing that there was no one around, Richard took out the scroll and sent the car into the scroll of mountains and rivers. Back to the hotel. Richard entered the room and locked the doors and windows. Enter the scroll again. A row of thoughts of death stood in front of Richard. Plant these saplings in the valley and plan well. If you don't understand, just look at the above. Outside, there was a knock on the door. Richard came out of the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. Opened the door. It was Karapika at the door. Karika, awake? How are you feeling? Chapter 197, Pink Eye Disease, Unknown, pretty good. When Karapika woke up, she felt a little stronger, albeit tired, because Karapika had a dream, a long nightmare. When I woke up, my whole body was sore. After realizing that he was in the hotel, Karapika realized that Richard should have brought him here, and after inquiring with the person at the front desk, he determined Richard's room number. Richard, what happened then? There are infected people, Richard said. I fought the infected. The opponent was very strong. I'm sorry, the entire cavern valley has disappeared and turned into a swamp. 99. I can only take you away. 99 infected? Karapika was taken aback. What does it look like? An old man. Is that the mayor? I don't know. Richard shook his head and said, I don't know the village chief you mentioned, but even if he becomes an infected person, he is no longer human. The infected don't treat humans as equals. They just hunt humans. Karapika fell silent. Condolences. Richard patted Karapika on the shoulder. I'm fine. Karapika raised his head again and said, 083, the village chief grandpa has already died and has become an infected person. That is a monster, and he is no longer the village chief grandpa. 99. Then Richard, has the media problem of the Cthulhu tribe been solved? Solved. That medium has been destroyed by me, Richard said. After all, there have been infected people, which means that the medium is no longer controllable. The medium has created the power of your Cthulhu people's red eyes, but that is a thing of the past. 5. The medium that created the infected must be destroyed, otherwise it will be a disaster for the whole world. This, Karapika wants you to understand. Karapika nodded. I understand. Otherwise, maybe this medium would turn into something like the resentment we've experienced. 35, that's right. Richard glanced at the time. Since you're awake, then we can leave here. It's just time for dinner. Let's go to the restaurant downstairs. It is good. The two walked into a restaurant. Not many people. It's not a big town with very little traffic. The level of the chef is also not very good. Richard only took 2 bites, then stopped his chopsticks. Karapika should eat more. Ajfa. After all, Karapika was in a coma much longer than Richard. By the way, Karapika, what are your plans next? Intend. Karapika thought for a while, then said, I plan to continue to investigate the information of the flaming eyes, and I will collect all the flaming eyes that are left outside. 5. In addition, there are 2 people I must kill. 99, Kralo and Sheila. Richard, how about you? Richard said, I'm going to go to the Sky Arena, and after that, it's probably the main job of destroying the media. I position myself as a media hunter. The believers, the cults, the infected, the agents, these are all things I have to deal with. The two walked out of the restaurant. Goodbye then. Goodbye. The two went in different directions. Richard went to a nearby city and took an airship to the city of the Sky Arena. And Karapika still wanted to go back to the Cave Skull Tower Valley to see, even though Richard had already said that the valley had disappeared and only the swamp remained. But Karapika still had to see it with his own eyes before he would be reconciled. After all, it was Karapika's hometown. Born there and grew up there. Without Phantom Troop, Karapika would still be living in the Cthulhu Valley, living peacefully and carefree with the rest of the Cthulhu tribe. But that's just Karapika's expectations. Hurry all the way. Karapika is fast. This road, Karapika has traveled more than once. Familiar with the road. Not long after, Karapika appeared before the swamp. Without hesitation, step indirectly. Countless poisonous insects that tried to attack Karapika died at Karapika's hands. Karapika kept moving forward until the end of the swamp. But ahead, there is no valley. There is none left. Nothing left. The Cave Skull Pagoda Valley has completely disappeared. A gloomy look appeared on Kurapika's face. At this time, Kurapika suddenly remembers sentence. Before leaving, what Richard said to Kurapika, "Where people are is their hometown." It's not about the hometown, not the place, but the people. In addition, Richard has a suggestion for Kurapika. Since you're the only one left in the Kaluta Pagoda, then, as the only remaining person of the Kaluta clan, Kurapika, you should get married and have children early to contribute to the reproduction of the Kaluta clan. The importance of this matter is no less than revenge. 35 Kurapika's face turned red. Richard reflected on Kurapika's experience and shook his head. Truly tragic. At such a young age, he suffered the end of the genocide. Richard remembered another character. Not this world. It's another world called Naruto. That world also has a race with special eyes. Uchiha. Like Kurapika, Sasuke Uchiha also suffered the fate of genocide. And what is even more tragic is that the murderer of Sasuke Uchiha's genocide is not a simple enemy, but Sasuke Uchiha's own brother, the one he admires the most. Of course, there's secrets in the middle. But what Sasuke Uchiha learned for a long time was that Uchiha Itachi was the murderer. Pink eye's not a good thing. Nyin, suddenly, Richard frowned. Fortunately, I absorbed the medium, not this. 99 The power of media is very complex, many kinds and many changes. The thief and the infected can only get 1 or 2 from it. Get more than 3, very rarely. Take the Dark Sonata, for example. What melody acquires is the ability to listen to the mind. What Richard got was murderous aura, the signature ability of the two-tailed snake. This shows from the side that the power of disaster creatures is indeed far more than that of human beings. It's not comparable to humans at all. Chimeric ants are only the bottom layer in the Dark Continent. This sentence is indeed fine, since chimeric ants can absorb human genes and improve themselves. 95, then, the genes of the creatures in the Dark Continent can also be absorbed, but they couldn't. Or, it is the biological power of the Dark Continent that they cannot absorb. Or, even if they absorb it, there are still more powerful creatures that can suppress them. 35 The front desk lady gave a formulaic smile. "Sir, where do you want to buy an airship ticket?" "Go here." Richard gave the name of the city where the Sky Arena is located. Chapter 198 Richard's suggestion on the airship. Richard closed his eyes and took a nap. After half a day, the airship landed. Richard got off the airship. "Maggie, I'm here." "Okay, I'll send 9 over here." Not long after, Maggie came down from the hotel with 9. After not seeing him for a while, Richard found that 9's temperament seemed to have changed a lot. Previously, 9 was like a young lady from a noble family, with a little more special hobby, that kind of naughty and charming feeling. But now she is a little more capable and spirited. Richard, 35, the moment 9 saw Richard. The circles of his eyes were a little red, and he couldn't help rushing towards Richard, throwing into Richard's arms. Maggie felt a little uncomfortable. However, Maggie immediately felt that her discomfort was somewhat inexplicable, strange. Richard patted 9 on the shoulder before 9 let go. "Maggie, is the car number the same as last time?" Richard looked to the side and said, "Go to the coffee shop and have a seat, and I will transfer the money to you by the way." 35 can. The 3 sat down in the coffee shop. 9 twittered about the experience of this time. It was an experience 9 had never had before. Where did 9 experience these things before except for divination? The rest of the time he did what he wanted to do, and it was entirely up to his own interests and hobbies. Because of the existence of the guards, 9 never thought about improving his strength. But now, 9 thinks differently. The Nasra family has withdrawn from the World Gang. I no longer have a guard. And even if there are guards, 9 is not at ease. After all, the last grievance is not a problem that the guards can solve. 9 wants to improve his strength and let himself have the power to protect himself. In the face of Maggie's almost severe training, 9 persisted. This made Maggie look at 9 in a different light. People from Meteor Street have a natural hostility towards people from the outside world, because Meteor Street was created by outsiders. Therefore, it is very difficult for people on Meteor Street to recognize people outside. Unless you show something worthy of their appreciation, they will do so. Maggie, have you left the Phantom Troop completely now? Not leaving. Maggie shook her head and said, the Phantom Troop no longer exists. Only a brigade of 13 of us can be considered a real brigade. The brigade is not Crollo alone. That one of them shouldn't be called a brigade anymore. Richard nodded. Then what are your plans in the future? Continue to make money, get back to Meteor Street, and donate money directly? 55, almost that's all I can do. 35, Richard paused and said, I personally have a suggestion. What advice? I have been to Meteor Street, and I have also seen those garbage mountains. Some garbage is indeed completely worthless, but not all garbage is worthless. A lot of garbage can be recycled and recycled. It's like paper, glass, metal, etc. Even kitchen waste can still be fermented to produce combustible biogas. 99, pure money is useless for those people. It can only solve temporary problems, and giving them a job may be a better choice. When they have a stable source of income, they don't have to be with outsiders. Nothing does it make a difference. Maggie's eyes lit up a little. How to do? Build a factory. Someone once said that there is no garbage in the world, only misplaced resources. In fact, there is still garbage. However, Meteor Street did not make the best use of its garbage disposal. If we can make the best use of it, it will definitely be able to solve the living problems of a large part of the residents of Meteor Street. I don't know the specific way, but I can be sure that this direction is correct. You could do your own research. Maggie nodded. Richard, thank you. You're welcome. Richard waved his hand and said, I just put forward an idea. During this process, you will definitely encounter many difficulties, and those need to be solved by yourself. 99, in addition to the technical difficulties, there's also a big problem that the world may not be so receptive to what this recycling garbage makes. A lot of people might think this thing is dirty, but as long as the sale is cheaper, there will definitely be people who choose to buy it. There are also many poor people outside. After all, a lot of things can be changed. Asking for flowers, 0 goodbye. 99 goodbye. 55 Nyan followed Richard to the airship plaza. Richard, where are we going now? Go to Ukexin. Richard intends to first send Nyan to Ukersin, enter the island of Greed, and let Nyan join with Hua, Sherdolong, and Betty. With the strength of Hua, Sherdolong, there are not many people who can threaten Hua, Sherdolong, and the island of Greed. Even a blaster. According to Richard's judgment, the strength of the explosion demon is probably the level of an ordinary Yin beast. And Hua, Sherdolong's strength level is D+, above the explosion demon. In addition, Nyan's ability to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages is excellent. Nyan and Betty both are divination-type abilities, but the two are going in different directions. Betty's ability is to find something. This thing already exists. Betty can divination to get the specific location information of this thing through some known conditions. And Nyan's ability is to divine a person's future destiny. In terms of hunter, Betty is more like a hunter for finding objects, and Nyan is a hunter for destiny. After that, Richard went to see Pence. After getting off the airship, Richard called Pence 3 times, but he didn't get through. This made Richard a little worried. After all, Peng Si's strength is not very strong. If the Chimeric Ant incident had not happened yet, Richard couldn't help but wonder if, under the influence of fate, Peng Si encountered the Chimeric Ant again and lost his life. Pence is an important part of Richard's team, irreplaceable. In addition, after getting along with Peng Si for so long, more or less, there will still be some feelings. Maggie returns to the Sky Arena. Nobunaga and Yuvijin sat opposite Maggie. Maggie repeated Richard's suggestion. How do you feel about the feasibility? Recycling garbage? Nobunaga frowned and said, Isn't this what the elders are doing? If we participate, it won't change anything. The recycling that Richard said is not what the elders recycle. What they recycle is only those luxury goods, valuable antiques, and the like, while what Richard said, those waste paper, glass, metal cans, the elders do not despise. However, to recycle these things, there will be certain difficulties in the process. And Chapter 199, Entering the Island of Greed. Yuvijin, what do you think? I don't understand. Yuvijin shook his head and said, I'm good at fighting, and I'm good at it, but I'm really not good at this. 35 Nabinaga looked at Maggie again. It's up to you, Maggie. 99, of the three of us, your brain is the best. Maggie nodded. I decided to give it a try. The reason is very simple. Our current approach cannot really change Meteor Street. Trying that method is just a waste of a few years, even if it fails. This time, we are wasting time. 35 Nabinaga stood up. Okay, then let's decide. Ro, Maki said, I'll go to find out the relevant information. Nabinaga, Uvijin, you two continue to be in the Sky Arena. Starting this plan may require a lot of money. 083. No problem. Just leave it to us. We continue to register until we get the position of the floor master. Richard took 9 back to the small house he bought at that time and opened it up. Sudden, Richard's pupil shrank. Because of this room, there are traces of someone entering. Richard hurriedly came to the place where the game client was placed. It's an anger arranged by Richard. Open. The game client is still there. Richard breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay, it's still there. At this time, Richard suddenly had an idea to build team base. Because there's no team base, it is really inconvenient. The world will never lack greedy people. There is nothing valuable in the suite that Richard bought, but there are still people who have sneaked in and rummaged here. If they find the Greed Island game client, it will be a problem. And last time, Richard bought some saplings in the town and was targeted. When I left the town, I met some people. You may think that Richard is a rich man and wants to steal some money from Richard. It's just that they typed the wrong note. Their own strength and courage do not match. He was later killed by Richard. He was sent into the picture scroll of mountains and rivers by Richard and became the nourishment of the land. A picture of mountains and rivers is only suitable as a base for me alone, not as a base for a team. The team needs one. Nathra has Nathra Manor. Jorn also has his own estate. And Phantom Troop also has its own base on Meteor Street. The Zoldyck family has even occupied the Dry Mountain. Richard pondered. Richard, is this the thing that takes people to the real game world? Nyan stared at the client of Greed Island with a curious expression on his face. Yes, this is it. Richard locked the doors and windows. Let's advance the game. Richard and Nyan, holding a memory card respectively, inserted them into the game client. Next moment, the bodies of the two were wrapped in a mass of air. After that, their bodies turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the room. When they appeared again, the two had already reached the Island of Greed, a real island, transformed by the team of gene freaks. The above monsters, cards, and NPCs are all made by the Nun and the Gene Freaks team. The two came down from a small room. The above is a real NPC who will introduce some game situations to players who enter for the first time. That's amazing. Nyan looked around curiously. Sudden, a figure fell in front of the two at an extremely fast speed. Suddenly, the man's expression froze, because when the man couldn't even finish the spell, Richard had already come behind the man, and the recorder in his hand was aimed at the man's neck, and Richard could kill the man with just one tap. Open your address book and let me have a look. Yes. 99, Richard browsed above. But I didn't see Hua Sherdolong's name. The Island of Greed is so big, it is not easy to find Hua Sherdolong and Betty. On Peng Si's side, I don't know if the situation is urgent or not. Richard frowned. Sudden, Richard saw several familiar names. Gone, Killua, Biscuit. Richard glanced at Nyan again. Following Biscuit's words, Nyan is safe. After all, Biscuit's strength has already exceeded the limit of ordinary players in this game. If it weren't for training Gone and Killua, Biscuit would have to deal with the exploders alone. It wouldn't be a big problem. One punch for one. If there are 3, then 3 punches will be fine. Youngu is more powerful than Hua Sherdolong. According to my judgment, the strength level is C. And Biscuit, it's only going to be stronger. Richard pointed to Gon's name. Use peers and take us to where this person is. Yes, yes. Young people dare not have the slightest doubt. Use your peers, Gon. Suddenly, a group of light enveloped the youth, Richard and Nyan. Biscuit stared at the sky. His eyes narrowed slightly. Who? In the canyon below, a wisp of hope appeared on the face of a thin young man. It's an opportunity. The skinny youth looked at Biscuit. Maybe you can take this opportunity to escape the hands of this old witch. Gon and Killua, aware of it at this time, couldn't help but look up. Boom! 3 figures fell. Biscuit stared warily. Gon, Killua, long time no see. Richard. A smile appeared on Gon's face, and Killua's expression softened. For Richard, Killua was unconvinced for a long time, but now Killua has understood that he is still a long way from Richard and is not an opponent at all. And last time, Richard lent money to Gon, and he helped Gon again, even without 5.0 success. But 20 billion renminbi is not a small amount. Killua had a lot of goodwill towards Richard. When Biscuit saw the expressions of Gon and Killua, his vigilance relaxed a little. You know each other? Well, Richard is our friend, and he took the hunter exam in the same group as us. Gon looked at Richard and asked, Richard, why did you also enter the game? I just came in to see. Richard said, this is Nyan. This time I mainly bring Nyan in, and I will leave later. 39. I need you to do me a favor. Help me take care of Nyan. If you meet Huasher Dolong, you can hand Nyan a Huasher Dolong. Nyan is a new member of my team. I have other things to deal with, and I am in a hurry. Is it okay? Gon nodded. No problem. Chapter 200 Extra Sculptures. Please complete order. Sudden. The thin young man in the canyon moved, and when Gon, Killua, and Biscuit were all looking at Richard, they rushed out of the canyon at a very fast speed. Biscuit's eyes flickered. Boom! A stone was thrown in the middle of the back of the thin young man's head. The thin young man rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. This thin young man, Richard had an impression. The weapon used is scissors. You can get other people's information by tasting other people's hair. This is a very good ability. But unfortunately, this man chose the wrong profession. This ability, if you choose the medical industry, will achieve unprecedented achievements. Not even weaker than Leo Rio. But he just wanted to be a criminal. Richard looked away. Richard looked at Biscuit and pretended not to know him. After all, the two had never met before. Biscuit just smiled. Killua spoke. This is our current teacher. Don't be fooled by her appearance. She is a real old woman. Immediately, Biscuit's expression collapsed. 091 punch. Killua's head was smashed hard. What? Killua screamed and squatted with her head in her hands. This is Biscuit, Gon said. Long-awaited great name. Biscuit gave Killua a hard look before turning to Richard. Have you heard of me? I heard it from Pion Senpai. No wonder you know Jorn. 99. Hearing this sentence, Biscuit became less wary of Richard. Jorn is a member of the 12 Hunter Guild, and Biscuit is also the second-star hunter of the Hunter Association. By the way, Richard, don't you know, Biscuit is Yunga's teacher. Those who can hand over the ability like Yunga, Gon, it seems that you have found a good teacher this time. Biscuit smiled. Ashamed. Richard didn't talk much to Gon at all. The time is a little urgent. Nyan will ask you first. Good. 99, Nyan, then I'll go first. Goodbye. Richard turned to Youth. Use peers and take me to the city with the most cards. 55, yes. Use a peer. Martha Dora. The next moment, the figures of the two disappeared. Richard grabbed a card from a player and left. After. Use leave. Richard's figure reappeared in Ukexen, next to the Greed Island game client. Biscuit, Gon, Killua all looked at Nyan. Nyan, are you a nun? 35. Nyan nodded, then shook his head again. Biscuit frowned. Nyan explained, I have an ability, but I haven't learned none, and I don't know why I got this ability. Richard guessed it may have something to do with the medium. Biscuit's expression turned serious. You know the medium? It's a tarot card. Nyan said, I got this tarot card from an old fortune teller, and soon after I got it, I acquired the ability to fortune. But the last time I went back to the manor, the tarot card disappeared and turned into a monster, which Richard said was resentment. 35, were stuck in the manor. It was Richard who figured out the escape rules, and then the medium. We can get out of it. These things Richard and Nyan have said, there is no need to keep them secret, because Richard has reported this matter to the Hunter Association, and as long as it is Hunter, it is eligible to check. Richard would like to have more Hunter focus on the media thing. In this way, Richard can get more media information. By the way, Nyan, do you know Karapika? Gon suddenly felt that the name sounded familiar. You know Karapika? We are friends with Karapika. Gon looked at Killua next to him. Karika was my captain before. Nyan smiled and said, I didn't expect you all to know each other. 39-9. Do you know where Karapika is now? I don't know. 35-9 shook his head and said, after our Nasla family quit the gang, we don't need so many guards. Karapika just left. I don't know where he went. That's it. Biscuit glanced at Nyan. Nyan, do you want to train with Gon and Killua? 35, the skinny young man on the ground, just woke up and was shocked when he heard this sentence. What training? Obviously beat him. Need not. Nyan shook his head and said, I've just started practicing, and I won't be able to keep up with the progress. The thin young man breathed a sigh of relief. Richard took down the game client of Island of Greed and sent into the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. Someone has already been here. It's not safe. Richard is leaving again, and putting it here again is inappropriate. If it doesn't work, keep it with Maggie. 9. With Maggie's character, as long as I give money, there is basically no problem. 55, however, when Richard called, he learned that Maggie had left the Sky Arena and was investigating the matter of the garbage recycling factory, and the location was uncertain. Otherwise, let's put Buttra there first. Richard thought about it for a while and thought it was feasible. Buttra is a businessman, and Buttra asked for herself. Since Buttra would agree to deal with Richard, it proves that Buttra is not absolutely sure that he can get the breath of the Archangel. Then Buttra would not be able to 083, nor would he dare to do anything to Richard's game client. And Buttra is not strong enough. The next thing that can be taken out is the absolute pull. Juzi Jula itself is not strong, let alone his teammates. With the strength of Hua Sherdolong, he is not afraid at all. In addition, Richard remembered that until the end of the Greed Island incident, there was no major accident in the client base of Buttra, and the people inside returned to Ukexan safely. Richard found Buttra and set his request. As expected by Richard, Bartra readily agreed. Richard pulled out a map. Last time Peng Si said that he was going back to his hometown to solve some problems. Peng Si's hometown is at this location. Richard drew a red dot on the map. It will take 2 days to get there by airship. 5. You could buy a car first, which is suitable for the wild, and when you are nearby, you could directly take it out of the picture scroll of mountains and rivers and drive it. After owning the valley, the space in the picture scroll of mountains and rivers is much larger. And many more. Richard looked towards the temple and suddenly frowned, because Richard felt that the temple seemed to have undergone some changes. Richard walked in. It was to see that next to the sculpture similar to himself, there was an extra sculpture. Just be smaller. Richard's pupils shrank slightly. Isn't this the magician in the tarot cards? Chapter 2, A One Don't Go to Honey Village. In this way, after absorbing the magician's medium, it turned out to be feedback here. But what's the use of this magician sculpture? Richard came under the sculpture and reached out to touch it. A burst of information entered Richard's mind. Richard got it. The role of this sculpture is the inheritance of power. Richard can make this sculpture and a human have a connection relationship, and then let this human get the ability of this sculpture, which is equivalent to a thief. But not Richard, because Richard has established a connection with the sculpture in the center. One person can only connect one sculpture. Magicians have many abilities. 35. The power of the messenger. The scepter that represents fire, the sword that represents wind, the star coin that represents earth, and the holy grail that represents water. These are the abilities of magicians, but I am not sure which abilities can be obtained by establishing a connection. Richard's eyes lit up. For Psychic, fighting alone is always the last resort. A mature team can burst into stronger power, but compared to Richard, the strength of the players often can't keep up. Even Huasher Dolong is still far from Richard. However, if the ability can be obtained from the sculpture, Richard can improve the strength of the players, and this connection is controlled by Richard. In other words, Richard can deprive this ability at any time. Don't worry at all, the other party betrays. Wait until you see Pence. Richard called Pence again, but still no one answered. Isn't there really any danger? Richard asked Pence at the time, but Pence's answer to Richard was that it was just some ordinary things at home, and there would be no danger. Boarding the airship, Richard closed his eyes. Greed Island. Nyan looked at Gon and Killua below with envy. It's amazing, so young, so powerful. While I was so young, I was still playing with dolls. Biscuit smiled. What's wrong with playing with dolls? Of course people live according to their own interests. This is the life principle of Biscuit. Otherwise, Biscuit would not have developed his abilities into that strange appearance. Obviously, can become a powerful nun, but he gave up the ability to choose a life type, so much so that he can only fight with his fists, not taking advantage of it. Biscuit not weak. However, Biscuit should have been stronger. But Richard is strong, and I want to keep up with Richard. At the mention of Richard, Biscuit nodded. Richard, really strong. 99, even if he had only met once. Biscuit had already sensed that the thoughts on Richard's body were completely different from the normal nun, giving him a dangerous aura. And there are not many that can make Biscuit feel dangerous. You really want to catch up with Richard? 55, then let me train you. In exchange, how about you help me with a divination? 35 foot, yes. 99 Nyan refused to train with Biscuit for the first time because he knew the gap between him and Gon and Killua. But now what Biscuit said was not training with Gon and Killua. Instead, train alone. This Nyan will not refuse. Okay, let's start then. Biscuit quickly took out a pen and paper. The ability of divination can know the fate of the next month. This is a desire that many people cannot resist. Nyan's ability is not strong in terms of combat, but for other people, it is very attractive and can make countless people rush to pay various prices. Even a mature nun like Biscuit could not resist, and Crusoe, too, would love to acquire this ability. Unfortunately, it was stopped by Richard. The prophetic poem appeared on paper. What does it mean? Nyan picked it up and glanced at it. Nothing happens. It's pretty bland. That's it. 35, there was a hint of disappointment in Biscuit's eyes, and he suddenly felt that he couldn't do anything. The airship fell. Richard opened his eyes. Here. 35 walking out of the airship plaza, Richard took out the map. The village where Pengsi lives is called Honey Village. The whole village makes a living by raising bees. So Pengsi has been in contact with honey since she was a child. So she keeps honey in her hat. Richard came to a corner where no one was around and took the car out of the picture of mountains and rivers. After that, drive out. Gradually move away from town. The surroundings became quiet. After a long time, a village appeared in Richard's sight. When this isn't Honey Village is deeper. Hearing the sound of the car, many people looked up at Richard. Richard stopped the car. This old man, do you know how to get to Honey Village? Are you going to Honey Village? The old man's face changed. Richard nodded. Yes, a friend of mine sent me a text message and asked me to find him. Young man, I suggest you don't go. Don't go. Why? Honey Village. There seems to be something wrong. The old man said, if people from Honey Village want to enter the city, they must pass through our village, so we are still familiar with it. However, some time ago, we didn't know what happened to Honey Village, and we only heard a loud noise. No one walks out of Honey Village anymore. There are people in our village who want to go over and have a look, but if they don't get close, they will be attacked by poisonous bees, and no one can get close. 5, Richard frowned. Then old man, do you remember that almost 2 months ago, a girl with green hair returned to the Honey Village? Green hair? You say Pence? Do you know the old man? How can I not know? Pengsi used to send me honey, and I had a good time with my granddaughter, not a sister, but a sister. 2 months ago, Pengsi did come back, but like other people in Honey Village, never came out again. The old man's eyes flickered, and he lowered his voice. Since you're Pence's friend, I'll have a few more words with you. The Honey Village, they all say it's haunted. It's a vicious ghost who killed the entire village. Richard doesn't believe this. What the hell? In this world, Richard has not seen the existence of ghosts or the idea of death. The possibility of pretending to be a ghost is obviously greater. Old man, thank you for your reminder, but I'm definitely going. I don't know what happened to Pengsi, but I can't leave here. She is my friend and my partner. Do you have any other news, old man? The old man sighed. It's useless. Even if you want to go, you can't get in. There are poisonous bees there, and the poisonous bees can sting people alive. Forget it, I'll tell you. In addition to the loud noise, in the middle of the night, there will be a very strange sound. Very eerie. Chapter 202, the person who pretends to be a ghost. Richard went anyway, driving, and didn't stop until the steep mountain road. The next road is no longer drivable. To the old man, Richard has already judged that half of it is true and half is made up by the old man himself. Rumors are always more and more exaggerated. Pykiniton's death thought read the old man's memory. But there is danger, that's for sure. Those poisonous bees are hiding around the honey village. If someone gets close, they will attack. Buzz. Richard took out his recorder. A bee slammed towards Richard. Boom. Richard greeted the recorder. The bee exploded directly. Immediately, more bees come. However, none of them could pose a threat to Richard. These bees were too weak. Even if Richard doesn't kill them. But even Richard's entanglement, they can't break through. Richard kept moving forward. Finally, some village buildings appeared in Richard's sight, similar to Cthulhu village. The village is also built in a valley. The surrounding trees are very dense, especially on the nearby mountains. Not ordinary trees, but some kind of fruit trees are now blooming extremely beautiful flowers. A burst of floral fragrance lingers in the valley. Richard walked into the village. 083 came to the door of a house. Push away. There was no one in there. Second home. The same is true. None of them. If they did die at the same time, it wouldn't be, obviously, something else attacked. The old man mentioned that there was a loud noise. Richard looked around for a week and couldn't find anything that might make a loud noise. Another room was pushed open. Pence. Richard saw an item, a costume on Peng Si's body. Richard knew it. This item was bought by Richard and Peng Si when they were visiting Ukexin's flea market. It is now certain that Pensy has indeed returned to Honey Village. Richard took out his phone. The cell phone has a signal. 35 can't get through the phone. It must be because of other reasons. Sudden, an extremely dense sound rang out. Richard looked up and saw a dozen giant bees. Much bigger than what Richard saw when he entered the village. All black, not like a bee, but like some kind of beast. The body exudes a metallic luster. However, for me, it's no different from those bees outside. Richard took out his recorder and smashed the bees. The bees burst and the juice splashed. Richard frowned, because Richard smelled blood in the bees' juice. These bees have drank blood. Richard's pupils shrank. Save the last bee. The picture scroll of mountains and rivers wraps it around and cannot move. Richard walked into a house. Pike Nortan, can you read the memory of this bee? Pykinaton shook his head. Richard waved his hand, and Pykinaton's thoughts of death disappeared. Then, I can only hide my breath and follow this bee to see if I can find any clues. The entire honey village was deserted. Richard wanted to find Pence, but there was no direction. It would be a lot easier if Betty was there and the power had been rediscovered. Too bad Richard didn't find Betty on the island of Greed. And Betty should still be doing the basic training before none, and has not yet regained the divination ability. Hidden, Richard restrained his breath. The bee was then released. The bee fluttered its wings, as if not seeing Richard. When the bees came out of the room, Richard followed from a distance. The bees flew to the back of the village. A huge tree came into Richard's line of sight, and above this big tree, there's a beehive. The bee flew back to the hive. Circle. Richard diffused his breath out. With Richard as the center, everything around is in Richard's perception. However, Richard didn't feel anything strange. No people, no dead bodies. Only bees. Where did the people in the village go? Ajfa. Even if killed, there should always be a corpse. Richard returned to the village. Into the night. The sky darkened. The wind in the valley roared. No thoughts of death. No ghosts. 35 Richard had an idea and made a puppet of his own. After that, he entered the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. The thoughts of death have planted all the saplings, and the survival rate is half and half. But this is enough for Richard. As time goes by, the vitality in it will become more and more intense. Richard's plan was for the backyard of the temple to be cultivated as a seed. On both sides of the valley, fruit trees are planted. In the valley, potatoes, corn, and vegetables are grown. Afterwards, an area will be open for the breeding of poultry and livestock. When one day, Shanha Picture Scroll can be self-sufficient and form a cycle by itself without resorting to external resources, then Richard's plan is considered to have completed the first stage. After that, you can gradually add and improve. The night passed and nothing happened. The puppet is safe and sound. Nothing bothers. The next day, Richard went to the back mountain again and came to the huge tree. The only thing that makes Richard feel strange here is this. A thought moves. The picture scroll of mountains and rivers wrapped around the beehive on the tree. The hole is rolled up. Buzz. The bees inside fell into a panic, constantly shaking their wings. But they cannot destroy the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. With Richard's control, the channel in the picture scroll opens. This beehive was sent into the picture scroll valley by Richard. Next moment, the picture scroll disappeared, along with the beehive. At this moment, Richard suddenly felt a sense of malice. Serious malice. Richard turned back quickly, but the other party has withdrawn his sight. Richard quickly chased after him. Boom! The other party suddenly disappeared. Richard had to stop. Back under the tree again. After the hive disappeared, the tree returned to normal. Soon, it's night again. A strange sound rang out. There was also a strange smell. Not far away, a phantom suddenly appeared. It seems that this is the ghost that the old man said. However, I have determined that the other party is a human being. Even though I didn't catch up today, I can be sure. 35, a living person. Years Richard stayed where he was, waiting for the opponent to take the initiative to attack. Dark place. A young man stared at Richard fiercely, with a strong look of resentment in his eyes. Damn aliens! Steal my hive? Kill you. 35 behind Richard. A circular hole appeared. Sudden, two bees emerged from the hollow. The wings vibrated, but there was no sound. Suddenly stabbed at Richard. The needle was black. Seems to be dripping water. Extremely poisonous. Chapter 203 Dance with Death. Richard didn't dodge. Puffed. The needle stabbed straight into Richard's neck. Immediately, the venom spread out. Puff. Richard fell to the ground. Not long after, a young man walked out. Looking at Richard on the ground, there was a touch of anger on his face. Where did this guy hide my hive? The youth stepped forward, picking Richard up, and at this time, sudden, a picture scroll wrapped around the young man's ankle. At the same time, Richard in the hands of the young man suddenly shattered into countless pieces. Fake! The youth's pupils shrank. This Richard is just a puppet. The real Richard hid in the ground long ago. Richard came out of the ground with a thought. Immediately, the picture scrolls entangled more towards the youth. The youth struggled hard. A circular hole appeared in front of the youth, and the youth slammed into the hole. However, the power of the picture scroll was too strong, and it pulled the young man back abruptly. Richard opened the passage of the painting scroll of mountains and rivers and sent the youth into the space of the painting scroll. After that, Richard also entered. The young man's face became extremely gloomy. Where is this? The moment he saw Richard, a void appeared in front of the youth again. The young man got into the void, but when the young man reappeared, he was still in the picture scroll and did not return to the real world outside. This situation made the young man's face become ugly. Why do my abilities fail? Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. None of the space type, which is rare. It's no wonder that I can pretend to be a ghost. I can't even perceive the existence of my circle. If it wasn't for his flaws when I took the beehive away, I wouldn't even know this person existed. But now, he has become my turtle in the urn. When I kill him with mental pollution, this ability can be used by me. Richard thought for a moment. The next moment, dozens of thoughts of death appeared. This young man has special abilities, but his real strength is not strong. The comprehensive level will not exceed the Een Beast. Moreover, the youth's spatial ability is not invincible, and there will be time requirements. In the face of so many thoughts of death, it is impossible to escape. Soon, two thoughts of death caught the youth. Press hard. There is no opportunity for youth to use none. Pike Nortan. Richard asks Pike-Kenatan to read the youth's memory. Afterwards, Pike-Kenatan reports to Richard. Richard's face became more and more gloomy as Pike-Kenatan reported. Because this young man is really a scumbag. The youth is also a member of the honey village. Like Peng Si, he is good at cultivating honey. When the strength reached the point where the honey village could no longer provide help, the young man, chose a completely different route from Peng Si. Pincy walked out of the village and wanted to be a hunter. The young people are constantly studying the cultivation of bees, but in the process, the youth took a wrong turn. There was nothing wrong with the bloody smell Richard had smelled before. The method adopted by the youth is to use human blood to cultivate the bees. The huge bees Richard had seen before, as well as the pitch-black bees, were made by young people in this way. In the beginning, the youth were caught by outsiders. At the back, the number of outsiders could no longer satisfy the youth, so the youth extended his hand to the people in the village. Most of the people in Honey Village are close relatives. The youth killed these people, not even their own parents. In order to cultivate bees, he fell into madness. Why did Pince go back to Honey Village? Not because Pincy's parents called for help. Instead, the young man pretended to be Peng Si's parents and made up a reason to let Peng Si come back. The young man coveted Peng Si. To let Peng Si come back is to make Peng Si identify with herself and embark on this path together with herself. But Pince refused, so the young man made another decision. Turn Pincy into bait for those honey too. The two fought. Peng Si fell into the wind and was forced to jump off the cliff. Heard here. Richard stopped. Pike Noten, tell me where the cliffs are. 99, yes. Pike Noten read the youth's memory again. Richard came out of the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. The handling of the youth is not in a hurry. More importantly, Pince, just jumping off the cliff, Richard thinks Pincy might still be alive. Men are not so vulnerable. This way, 35 soon, Richard reached the cliff. It was dark below. Richard tied one end of the mountain and river scroll to a stone next to it, and then went down the scroll. 0. Ask for flowers. 0 pence. Richard's voice echoed off the cliff. At the same time, round 35 Richard also released a lot of thoughts of death. Buzz. There was a sound of the rapid vibration of wings. Richard's pupils shrank. I saw a few giant bees, even bigger than the bees cultivated by young people. Cobweb. Richard lifted the recorder. A cobweb fell, binding several bees together. No one responded. Thoughts of death came back one by one, but no trace of Peng Si was found. The youth's memory. Peng Si jumped from here. It is impossible to have no traces. Sudden, a dangerous breath fell on Richard's body. Richard's eyes changed. There are not many things that can make the current Richard feel dangerous. Richard's strength is only a little short of A level. And to the A level, that is the level of the world's top nun. Above Hisoka, Crawlo, Liza, and others. The bees cultivated by the previous youth, although special, did not give Richard this feeling. Buzz. There was another strong, flapping sound of wings. Richard looked forward. Is to see. Hundreds, no, thousands of bees swarmed themselves. These bees have the breath of mindfulness on their bodies. Not an ordinary bee. Awakened nun's bee. With so much, it's no wonder I feel threatened. 35 Richard took out his recorder and played. Crazy Sonata. Against a large number of enemies, the effect of this ability is the best. These bees are not infected, not thieves, not resentful. Then it will inevitably be affected by spiritual pollution. A bee's condition has gone wrong. Turning his head, he attacked the bee beside him. Suddenly, the entire bee colony became a mess. All the bees went into a frenzy. Bee after bee fell. Turned into a corpse, the thought of death appeared. The thoughts of death one after another were absorbed by the recorder. More bees emerged from below the canyon. However, it can't resist the spiritual pollution of Richard's crazy sonatas. A melodious clarinet sound echoed in the canyon. The bees, with their own death, accompany the dancers. Chapter 204. Huge Beehive. Richard has no idea how many dead bees there are. The use of Crazy Sonata does not need to consume a lot of gas. However, Richard is now approaching his limit. With Richard's enormous air capacity, it was almost reaching its limit, so one could imagine how many bees there were. A strong thought of death wrapped around Richard's recorder. A heavy breath spread out, circle after circle. It was as if a stone had fallen in a still lake. Even the space seems to be shaking with it. Finally, the number of bees has decreased. Richard stopped. The remaining bees finally realized that they were not Richard's opponent and fled wildly around. Below the canyon, a huge hive entered Richard's line of sight. Just lay it flat on the ground. It is said to be a beehive, but it is more similar to an ant's nest in terms of shape. No other creatures dare to approach. The rich 083 honey scent is released from above. Let Richard a little bit unbearable. This honey should be considered an extraordinary ingredient. There are two kinds of food in this world. One is ordinary food. It is the food that circulates in the market and is eaten by ordinary people. Plus, great food. It has extraordinary energy, and after eating it, it is very helpful to the human body. During the hunter exam, those monsters that appear will provide extraordinary ingredients. It's just that it's a relatively low-level existence. The honey in front of Richard Assassin was obviously much higher. Round. Richard looked at the hive in front of him. The entire hive is within Richard's circle. Pence? Richard's pupil shrank. Richard felt it. In this hive, there's a person hiding. It was Pence, and the breath of life. Richard didn't hesitate to break open the hive. A huge hole appeared. Honey flowed out, golden yellow honey with a rich aroma. Richard saw Pence. The whole body is covered with honey. Not far from his side, a huge object, seeing Richard, gave birth to a fearful mood, moved and kept retreating. This one is the queen bee. Pengsi, wake up. 55 Richard took Pengsi out of the honey. Cough. Pengsi opened her eyes in a daze. Where am I? Am I dead? Richard? I am dreaming. Pence was stunned when she saw Richard. The expression is still confused. He hesitated. Suddenly, Pengsi used all her strength to prop up her body and approached Richard. I didn't expect the dream before dying. I can still have such a dream. In reality, I have no chance. But in the dream, I don't want to regret it. Richard didn't expect Pence's sudden action. Until lips touch. With that touch and the sweet taste, Richard realized something. But at this time, Pengsi has lost all her strength. Fall down again. Richard hurriedly reached out to test Pence's breathing. It's all right, still breathing. Just out of energy. Richard breathed a sigh of relief. Take Pengsi out of the hive. Take out a little water and feed it to Pengsi. Not long after, Pengsi woke up again. Hey, how did I get out? Are you still dreaming? Pengsi looked puzzled. It's not a dream. You wake up. It's the real world. 35 Richard's voice sounded. I moved you out of that hive. Pengsi was stunned for a while before she could react. Richard, it's really you. Are you here to save me? Thanks. Thank you. 35 Pengsi recalled her previous experience and couldn't help crying. Too difficult. As soon as he returned to the village, he found that the entire village was dead. My parents, the village chief, and so many people I knew were all dead. The murderer also wanted to be his accomplice. How can that be? But he is not the opponent of the murderer. It quickly fell into disrepair. In the end, he was directly knocked off the cliff by the opponent. Seriously injured, unable to move, until a bee finds itself and takes itself back to the hive. Pengsi didn't know what kind of fate she would face. Do those bees treat themselves as food? Fear, confusion, hatred, various emotions were intertwined in Pengsi's heart. Now that Pence sees Richard, she is really relieved. Richard, thank you. No, you're my team member. I should save you. 35 Richard paused and said, the murderer, who is already dead, was killed by me. I got the information from him that you fell into the cliff and found it here. Fortunately, you are still alive. From your description, it should be these bees that helped you zero. You're no longer injured, just a little weak. Pence quickly checked. Indeed. Suddenly, Pengsi thought of something, and her face turned red. Richard, when you rescued me just now, I didn't do anything, did I? Number 99, Richard thought back, shook his head, and smiled. That's good. Pengsi breathed a sigh of relief. At that moment, Pengsi really made such an action out of sincerity. But now, Pence doesn't have that kind of courage. Let's eat something. Richard brought out some food. It is good. After a while, Pengsi recovered a little and could stand up and walk on her own. Richard, I want to go see that hive. Okay, let's go together. 35 the two walked towards the hive. Enter through the broken part of the hive. The queen bee shrank into a ball, shivering. Richard knew that the queen bee was afraid of herself. Of those bees before, not too many died in Richard's hands. Richard, what's wrong? Peng Si showed a strange expression and said, I feel that there seems to be some connection between me and this queen bee, like a contract. I could talk to this queen bee. 99, however, this queen bee's IQ doesn't seem to be very high. It's like a child. She seems to take me as her master. She told me she was afraid of you. Richard frowned. You told her that as long as she didn't attack me, I wouldn't hurt her with a 5.0. It is good. Soon, Richard felt that the fear in the queen bee decreased. She believed it. She said, please don't hurt him. She could give you a lot of honey, and she would order the bees not to attack us, Pence said. Ken Richard looked at the queen bee in front of him and remembered a plan of his own. A plan to build a team base. This is undoubtedly a very suitable location. Under the cliff, there are vicious bees. These bees have thoughts, and their strength is not bad. If they met Richard, if other people with telepathy, they would not be the opponents of these bees at all. Even Hisoka and Krallo. The two of them don't have such a strong area damage ability as Richard. As for more than 80% of the bees killed by Richard now, it doesn't matter much. As long as the queen bee still exists, it can continue to multiply. Chapter 205, the name of the base originally. Richard's plan was to find a remote island, like Kim Freaks' team, surrounded by ocean currents, which could not be approached by normal means. But seeing this canyon now, Richard suddenly felt that it didn't have to be an island. One is that the island is not very easy to find. The other is, for something like a base, its own secrets can be used to guard against ordinary people. Really strong people, relying on the base to guard against, is far from enough. Determine a base, whether the defensibility is enough, more depends on the people. The base of the Zoldyck family is located in the Kukula Mountain. The local residents know that the wall is very high, but it is not enough for the psychic. An E-rank nun can jump over. There are not a few people who go to Zoldyck Manor to challenge. Wants to claim the name of Zoldyck's first killer family, but they all failed. Either died in the hands of Zoldyck's housekeeper, or died in the mouth of the big dog who guarded the house, and the flesh and blood of the whole body became the food of the big dog, and even the bones were shattered. Even if 09 is the stronger one, he will be defeated by the members of Zoldyck. Richard chose this canyon, the same. Those bees with thoughts can prevent ordinary people from entering, not only ordinary people, but none below B rank. As long as they do not have special abilities, they cannot defeat these bees. Richard told Pence about his plan. Building our team's base here. Pensy was stunned for a moment. Richard nodded. Yes, there are only two entrances and exits here. One is the cliff above, and the other is the cave in front, which is connected to the outside, and the terrain is hidden. So when are we going to start? 35, it's not too late just now. Richard already has an idea. Peng Si, just rest. I'll take care of it. Peng Si's body has not yet fully recovered. After sleeping in the honey for so long, Peng Si is not very convenient to move now, and it will take more time to return to normal. Richard glanced up at the cliff above. Compared to the canyon, the cliff is smaller, only 1/3 the size of the canyon, which means that the remaining 2/3 of the canyon has little access to light from above. That part of the canyon facing the cliff, Richard wasn't going to deal with it. What was before, what is after? And in the middle, Richard intends to build a wall to divide the canyon into two parts. In this way, things that fall from the cliff will not enter the base, but will be outside the wall. Since it is a cliff, things will inevitably fall. The front half is the canyon, and the back half is the base. The thought of death. Richard released the idea of death and started the construction of the wall. The power of the death thought of the giant spider is amazing. One stone after another was carried over, leveled, and trimmed into rectangular blocks. Once the ground is level, just lay it on it. Between the stones, the clay is filled to make the wall more solid. A few days later, the wall was built. One end was connected to the left side of the canyon, and the other end was connected to the right side of the canyon, completely dividing the canyon into two parts, reaching a height of 10 meters. The canyon walls near the fence, smoothed by Richard. Except for creatures that can fly, other creatures cannot enter the wall from outside the wall. After that, Richard began to level the area inside the fence and clear the ground. After the cleaning was completed, the wall was divided into 3 areas by Richard. One is the hive area. That huge beehive is located here. 1 queen, hundreds of bees. After making sure Richard won't kill it, the queen bee starts laying eggs frantically. The second is the central building area. This will be where the team members live. The third is the export area, connected to the cave. Buildings can be built later. Air circulation is possible, but water and light are still lacking here. 99, the entire base was barely lit and very dark. In such an environment, it is inconvenient to do anything, but the solution is not difficult. Richard knows that there's a crystal that can glow in this world. As long as the number is sufficient, it can provide enough light to the base and keep it bright for a long time. In addition, power on and install lights can also achieve this effect, but relying entirely on electric lights will inevitably be hampered. Once the power goes out, the entire base will be plunged into darkness. If you have a luminous crystal, you can buy it outside, so it's not a difficult thing to buy. As for the water source, I can bring one over. Richard looked up. Before going down the canyon, Richard remembered that not far from the cliff, there was a stream, a mountain stream, and a mountain spring. You can lead a branch from that stream. Richard climbed up the mountain wall. Pictures of mountains and rivers. 99, the scroll was submerged in the stream. Penetrating the stones at the bottom of the stream, the water flows down the cave, controlled by Richard, and continues to expand down until it reaches the top of the canyon wall before it stops. Crack. On the mountain wall, a crack appeared. Water flows down the crack. Diverted about 1/3 of the flow of that stream, almost enough, Richard made a puddle out. The circular water hole is located inside the base. After that, a 083 drainage channel was made, and the water overflowing from the pool was discharged into the first half of the canyon, and then flowed into the ground along the cracks in the ground there. When Peng Si woke up, she opened her eyes and looked at the scene in front of her. Her eyes widened with an expression of disbelief. When did this become like this? Pence was completely unrecognizable. It has changed from the previous canyon. As soon as the wall was built and the ground was leveled, it immediately looked extremely clean and tidy. Not at all like a canyon floor full of trash and decay. It's the completion of the first stage. Richard came over and said, just laying a foundation and solving the problem of air and water sources, the defense from the top of the canyon can be handed over to the bees, but the cave passage, we need to deal with it ourselves. There are also building, facilities, and lighting issues that need to be addressed. 9, but it's very soon, it's only 1 day. It's nothing, after all, none can't follow the work efficiency of ordinary people. Richard smiled. Peng Si, how are you recovering? It's almost there. I can move normally. That's good. Then, let's prepare other things that the base needs. 5, it is good. Pence suddenly asked. Then Richard, what is the name of our base? Chapter 206 Marin's ability name. Richard thought for a moment, then said, just call it Black Manor. 55 originally. What Richard thought was the Dark Manor, because his power comes from a certain disaster creature in the Dark Continent, and the route he is taking now is mainly based on the power of plundering the medium, and the medium also comes from the Dark Continent. But after thinking about it, Richard felt that it was too obvious. At the exit, it was changed to black. Peng Si looked back with a stunned expression. Is it because we have no light here? That's right. Richard didn't explain much. Immediately, with a thought, the recorder appeared in his hand. The next moment, Richard came to the mountain wall near the exit cave. Use the clarinet as a knife. Black Manor. The 4 characters were carved on the mountain wall by Richard. Name doesn't matter. Talent is what really matters. Let's go. The 2 walked out of the cave. Richard cleaned up the cave, by the way. Before, there were many creatures living in the cave, all of which were expelled by Richard. Some of them had a strong attitude and wanted to use their arms as a car, and Richard fulfilled them. Not even the whole body was left for them. Out of the cave, there's a forest in front. The trees are dense. There was no sign of anyone around. Richard glanced back. It's not very far from Honey Village, but the mountains are blocking it. If you want to come here from Honey Village, you have to detour for a long time, unless you jump directly into the canyon. Then, It's better to introduce electricity and internet from outside the forest. I can buy this forest. Soon, the two walked out of the forest. A small town appeared in the sight of the two of them. The two drove to a nearby city. Pengsi, I will place an order for some luminous crystals and some other things. You are ready to receive the goods here. Call me after you are sure, and I will pay. What about you, Richard? I'm going to Ukexin. Go to Ukexin? That's right. 35 Richard nodded and said, There is something in Ukexin. I have to get it myself. When I come back, you will know what it is, and you will be responsible for it here. It is good. What Richard was referring to was the game client of Greed Island. Now that the base already exists, then there is no need to put the game client in Butcher's hands. One thing after another was delivered to Pensy. Richard's purchases are not rare things, such as large batteries, small generators, luminous crystals, various building materials, and household items. As long as you have money, you can buy it. Richard stayed overnight at Ukexin. After getting the game client, Richard came to the hotel. Pictures of mountains and rivers. 9. Richard enters the valley of the picture scrolls. Forgive me. I know I was wrong. Spare my life. The young man cried out for mercy. But Richard could not spare the youth. The young man who did such a thing, in Richard's view, was an unforgivable existence. And more importantly, this young man almost killed Pengsi. If it wasn't for Pengsi's luck, he would be dead now. But that can only be regarded as Pengsi's luck and cannot relieve the youth's sins. Richard took out his recorder. A melodious clarinet sound rang in the young man's ear. The youth became crazy at a speed visible to the flesh. Eyes are red. It's like a rabbit that just got out of the cage, and everyone wants to take a bite. Oh, the youth pounced on Richard. Richard lifted the recorder. Crack. A bit. The young man's forehead was shattered, and his life completely disappeared. A group of thoughts of death appeared. Marin. This is the young man's name. Richard ordered the thought of death to bury Marin's body in the soil and turned it into fertilizer for fruit trees. After that, Richard took a serious look around the valley for a week. Richard's plan was successful. It has gradually transformed into a real world. Light, water, it's all here. Plants grow normally. Blossom, fruit, fallen leaves. And the hive that Richard sent and was hanging on a tree. The bees live normally. Compared with the outside world, these honeys are less aggressive. Marin's plan was quite successful, using human blood to cultivate a new species of bees. Not only the bees themselves are highly poisonous, but far more than ordinary bees. And honey seems to have other effects too. It works wonders for healing wounds. Marin, these bees, I will leave them in your care. 99 Marin's thought of death nodded. Richard came out of the valley of the picture scrolls. Marlin's abilities, Richard already knew. A space channel can be created. However, there are big flaws. Only Marin himself and bees can pass through this space. Other than that, nothing else works. Very restrictive. Compared with Nob's ability, the shortcomings are too obvious. Can only be used as a small ability. Use Marlin's death thought on its own, or use it with the bees under Pensy's control. Richard shook his head. By the way, after I go back this time, I can let Pensy establish a connection with the magician sculpture and see what abilities Pensy can get from the magician sculpture. Only relying on bees. Pengsi's strength is still a little worse. Richard's strength is getting stronger and stronger. When he took the hunter exam, Richard was only a C grade, and now he is a B+, which is only one line away from the A grade. In this case, if the strength of the teammates cannot keep up, the role of the team will drop to pole. Richard returned to the city called Shields. Pence, how is it? A yard was purchased by Richard. Everything ordered from the internet was delivered to this yard. Pensy stood alone. Except for the large battery, everything else arrived. After a pause, Pengsi said, Some people have been inquiring about the situation here these days, and even sneaked in the middle of the night. 2 good money were killed by me. Kill. Richard said, invading other people's homes, killing them. It's reasonable, we all said it. And if you don't do it, maybe they will do it to you. With Pengsi's previous character, it wouldn't be like this. At most, the opponent would be arrested. But after the incident in Honey Village, Pengsi's mentality changed a bit. I gotta want to get back. It's not too late. Let's go back today. Richard took out the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. All the things piled up in a yard are included in the picture scroll of mountains and rivers. Pincy's eyes widened. Richard, is this your nin? Yes. The advantage of being in this world is that no matter what kind of strange ability, it can be explained by none. Even if someone sees part of it, it doesn't matter. And Pence or Richard's team. Walk. Chapter 207 Dealing with Smart People. Richard glanced back, aware of the follower. There will never be a shortage of greedy people in this world. It's just that their greed is used in the wrong place, so what awaits them is death. Pence, get rid of them. It is good. Several bees flew out. Bang! 35, boom, boom. A series of explosions sounded. This is Pincy's ability to blow up bees. Directly blow up all those people. Suddenly, the stalker behind him didn't dare to keep up. The two entered the forest, passed through the cave, and returned to the base. Richard took out the picture scroll of mountains and rivers and took out all the things. First of all, 2 wooden houses were built, one by one. A wooden house, 2 rooms, a living room, and a bathroom. There are 2 rooms. Usually one is used as a study and the other is used as a bedroom. It was already a semi-finished product. It is very simple to build. Just follow the drawings. After 3 days, everything that should be arranged has been arranged. 2 wooden houses, everything is complete. A small oil fire generator is located in another corner, far away from the wooden house. Even if it is started, it will not make a lot of noise here. There is also a kitchen, which is against the wall, so that the 083 smoke and the light can go out, and it will not pollute the base. A warehouse where daily resources are placed. Richard built a cistern on top of the pool. Part of the water flows directly into the pool and part into the cistern. The height of the cistern is very high. This will lay the water pipes. In addition, above the reservoir, Richard also arranged water purification facilities. The toilets and kitchen waste will flow into another part of the canyon and flow away along the groundwater. This is Richard's first base. Richard has some feelings for this and wants to make this place a home, because after coming to this world, Richard has never experienced such a feeling. As soon as the memory of the previous life is awakened, it is already in a state of ruined and hunted down. Revenge afterwards. Increased strength. It was only now that Richard stopped. Finally done. Richard exhaled a long breath, because there were a lot of things to consider, so Richard was a little tired. Even if he fought a nun, Richard had never felt so tired. The area of the entire base is nearly 8,000 square meters, and what has been used now is only a very small part, Ajfa. For a real base, that's far from enough. Training grounds, intelligence studios, none of these yet. It's time to inlay the luminous crystal. Richard embedded the luminous crystal on the mountain wall, and soon, a milky white light radiated out, and as the number of crystals increased, the entire base suddenly became brighter. Not as dazzling as the sun, but it is brighter than the moonlight. Even ordinary people, clear things, have no problem. Pensy looked up, her eyes sparkling. This is our base. This is our base. Richard looked away. Then the next step is to connect the power and the network. The world, the power, and the network are indispensable, and a lot of information needs to rely on these two to obtain. 99 Punxi, just stay at the base, I'll contact you. Yes. Richard walked to Shield City. A dedicated staff immediately contacted Richard. Without him, because of money. This is a big business, and no one will turn down the opportunity to make money. What's more, Richard also paid the expedited fee. Immediately, the other party regarded Richard as a guest of honor. Please rest assured, we will arrange for you as soon as possible. 35, okay, then I'll wait. Richard didn't reply. This time, Richard has another thing. That is buying that forest. Now that the electricity and the network have been connected, some people must be curious as to what is inside and why the electricity and the network are connected. So Richard is going to make a disguise. Buy this forest, becomes a private area. Once someone breaks in, then Richard can kill the other party without any reason. So, this forest is the private property of Viscount Koken. That's right. 9, okay, I see, thanks. 99 Richard inquired about the information, left a note on the table, and then began to inquire about the information about Viscount Koken. Inexperienced. debauchery, waste. This is everyone's unified impression of Corkin, and it is entirely because he was born well that he inherited the family's industry. This kind of person is not very easy to deal with. Richard prefers to deal with smart people, because smart people know what to do and what not to do. After knowing Richard's strength, even if he is interested in that forest, he will not dare to do anything too much. But people with poor brains are not included in this list. Forget it. Find a middleman to save the trouble. Richard would rather pay a little more, because if he was dealing directly with Kokin, maybe Kokin would really twitch his head and stretch out his hand randomly, which would not be a threat to Richard. Anyone who entered would be killed. But in the end, it was more trouble. A fat man appeared in Richard's sight. "Mr. Richard, do you understand the profession of hunter?" "Learn a little bit." The fat man's attitude was a little cautious. "Then let me briefly introduce to you. I, Richard, once broke into the manor of Singed, one of the 10 old men of the world's gangsters, and killed his entire manor. Also, Phantom Troop, there are people who are my underdogs." 35, a cold sweat appeared on the fat man's forehead. Fatty had heard about it. He was a high-ranking figure, and he couldn't get in touch with it at all. Fatty had heard about the news of Sindide's death, and knew that he was killed by a single person. And Phantom Troop is equally famous, especially after the Ukexan auction. "Mr. Richard, what are you trying to say?" Richard took out the map. "I plan to buy this area and build a small manor. But the owner of this land, Kalkin, has heard that his brain is not very good, and I don't want any trouble in the middle. Therefore, I need you to help me with this." 39, the fat man was stunned. "It turns out to be like this. No problem, Mr. Richard. Don't worry, I will handle it well. You're not good at dealing with that fool. I happen to be good at it. Leave it to me. I will definitely handle it." 35, "Then I'll wait for your news. Please rest assured." 9, this is the wise man. To deal with save time and effort. In less than half a day, the fat man came back. "Mr. Richard, it's done." Fatty handed over a document. "This is the title certificate for the land, which is now fully yours, Mr. Richard." Richard opened the file, glanced at it, and nodded. "Good." The fat man quickly smiled and said, "Mr. Richard, do you need any other help?" Chapter 208, Living Roses subscription. "I will contact you if I need it in the future." Well, the fat man has seriously investigated Richard's information. Although only a part of the investigation has been found, the fat man is still shocked by Richard's situation. Having been in business for so long, Fatty knows it well. How important it is to know a powerful person, because such a person can easily take your life. After half a month, a wall was built on the periphery of the forest, 3 meters high, surrounding the entire forest, completely wrapping the forest, and a gate in the middle connected to the road outside. Inside, there's also a road. A few words were written on the wall. "Private area, please do not enter." This is not a warning, but a fact. In this forest, there are bees stationed. Anyone other than Richard and Pence, whoever enters, will be attacked. The equivalent of the dog in the Zoldyck estate. Not to mention ordinary people, even non-people, may not necessarily survive under the attack of bees. In addition to the offspring of the queen bee, there are also many ordinary bees, equally aggressive. Electricity and internet are all connected. Along the cave, entered the Black Manor. There are several more buildings inside. Richard entered a wooden house, took out the greedy island client, and after that connected the power supply and plugged it in. "Is this the game?" Peng Si looked at the game client and looked at it curiously. "That's right." Richard said, "Huasher DeLong, Betty, and 9 are all in the game right now. By the way, Pinsy, let me give you something." "What is it?" "Close your eyes, and you'll find out later." Peng Si closed her eyes, not knowing what to think. Her face flushed slightly. What Richard took out was a group of thoughts. From the picture Scroll Temple, the magician sculpture. As long as Peng Si accepts this group of thoughts, he can gain the power of the magician as a medium, just like the thief. Stealers, usually more powerful than normal nun. Why? Because the power obtained by stealing is equivalent to extra power. It is equivalent to having more power than others out of thin air. But carefully speaking, there are 2 types of thieves. One is that you already have none, and you get another ability by stealing. Similar to Melody, Kurapika. The nun of Kurapika itself is the chain. Fiery red eyes are obtained by stealing. There's also the ability to steal the ability. As one's own nun, Richard, Crusoe are all like this. The second will also be stronger than the normal nun, because this power comes from disaster creatures. And disaster creatures are undoubtedly extremely powerful. Go. Richard pushed the thought in his hand towards Peng Si. The next moment, this group of thoughts disappeared into Peng Si's body. A strange connection was established between Peng Si and the magician's sculpture, but it soon disappeared. Peng Si's figure slowly fell down. Richard helped Peng Si to the room. Peng Si lay flat on the bed. Richard didn't leave, but moved his stool and sat beside him. There was a slight sound of breathing. Richard suddenly noticed that Peng Si's brows were still furrowed, even though he was fast asleep. Involuntarily, Richard stretched out his hand and lightly touched Peng Si's forehead. Peng Si's brows relaxed. Richard withdraws his hand. A faint smell of honey emanated from his fingers. Peng Si's body had a strong honey smell before. Now, after being soaked in honey for a long time, the honey smell on Peng Si has become stronger. Long green hair scattered. Richard couldn't help but recall the first time he met Peng Si. At that time, I took the hunter exam by myself because of the pre-selection qualification, and Peng Si became a team member. The other two members were not strong enough. One didn't even pass the qualifiers, and the other fell in the first level. Only myself and Peng Si went to the end. But if it weren't for her, Peng Si would not be able to reach the end by her own strength. Since then, Peng Si has joined her team and followed herself, all the way to the Honey Village thing. Richard suddenly felt that he actually owed Peng Si a little, because the current team, for almost all their own business, whether it is to go to Meteor Street, or to Yukeksin, or to let Huasher Dolong and Betty go to the Island of Greed to improve their strength, all because of their own needs. But a real team can't be like this. Even Phantom Troop, the members of the brigade, respected Crusoe, called Crusoe the head of the regiment, and had little doubt about Crusoe's orders. Even if Richard showed evidence, they did not trust him. 0. Ask for flowers. 0 instead, keep asking. When it was really discovered that Crusoe's goal was not to revive Meteor Street, or in other words, not to simply revive Meteor Street, but to focus on his own private interests, those other members were angry. What I do now and Crusoe are really no different. 5. Totally consider my own thoughts and what to do, without regard to the thoughts of the rest of the team. 99. Richard thought about replacing himself as an ordinary player. Blindly sacrifice your life for one person, even if this person is very respectful. But such a thing, Richard can't do it either. Do unto others. Do not impose on others. Richard looked at Pence on the bed. When Pence wakes up, it's time to ask them what they think. That's what makes a team last longer. Pensy opened her eyes. Richard, wake up. 95, what happened to me just now? I gave you a gift. How is it? Do you feel any change? Pensy hesitated. It seems there is. I felt, in my mind, there was something more. 5. Next moment, a bouquet of roses appeared in Pensy's hands. Richard frowned. Pence said, I suddenly have an ability. The name is Sheng Sheng Rose, and the petals of the rose can be eaten and eaten to heal wounds. Pence looked up at Richard, remembering what Richard had said before. Her eyes lit up. Richard, is this your gift to me? That's it. Richard is quite satisfied with the result. The magician in the tarot has many characteristics. Peng Si's ability to obtain roses from it is not bad. After all, there are very few healers of none. Therefore, in the plot, Liurio will be absorbed as one of the 12 hunter branches. Now that Pensy has obtained this ability, then the necessity for Richard to let Liurio join his team becomes less important, and Pensy can act as the healer of the team. However, Pensy, this is a secret between you and me. Don't tell any third person. None of them. Take it as your own none. Peng Si's expression became serious, and she nodded. Good. And Chapter 209 Pensy's goal, the things that Richard was able to give others were not really undisclosed. Because the value of this ability exists is to use it. And the more you use it, the more people will know about it. Richard chooses to keep it secret because others may associate this ability with the media that Richard destroyed, and then others will realize that even those dangerous media are valuable. then Richard had to pay a higher price to get those mediums. Hazardous agents will also become valuable goods. Of course, when Richard gives his ability, he will definitely make a choice. He is not someone he absolutely trusts, and Richard will not give them his ability. However, this cannot guarantee the absolute confidentiality of the secret, because none is special. Similar to the way of reading memory of Pikenaten, even if the person who is given the ability by Richard does not say it, other than people may also be able to obtain the information. However, because 083 is afraid of the leakage of information, it is not used, which would put the cart before the horse. It is equivalent to a nun. In order to keep his abilities secret, he does not use it when fighting the enemy. Is it necessary to be beaten to death by the enemy for the sake of secrecy? By the way, Pince, have you thought about what you want to do in the future? Do you have any ideals? Ideal? Pince was stunned for a moment. After that, fell into silence. After a long time, Peng Si raised her head. My ideal when I was a child was to make our honey village better, to let my parents live a good life, to go to a big city, and to have family fun. 99, but now it's all gone. They are dead. Honey village is gone. Sudden. Clap. 2 lines of tears fell. The death of her parents and the disappearance of the village were a huge blow to Peng Si. Unlike Richard, after Richard awakened the memory of his past life, the memory of his past life dominated. I don't really care about this life. And Richard has had his revenge. Richard didn't say much, just patted Pince on the shoulder. Richard. Pince suddenly looked up. Can you set a goal for me? Richard frowned. May I help you set a goal? Yeah, I don't know what I want to do now, but the only person I can trust now is you. Pince suddenly grabbed Richard's hand tightly. You help me set a goal. Richard hesitated for a moment. This is not in a hurry. Since you can't think of it for a while, let's go to relax first. How about it? After the hunter exam, we haven't stopped for a long time. How about going to a restaurant, going shopping, going to an amusement park? Pince hesitated. Let's go. The two came to Shield City. Store after store. Walk back and forth. Clothes, toys, snacks. The two are like ordinary people, similar to countless ordinary people on this street. Gradually, Peng Si's face softened, and a smile appeared on her face. Ordered a large table of dishes at noon. Delicious, eat it all. If it was not delicious, the two of them lowered their voices and whispered. In the afternoon, the two came to the playground. Mostly young people and children, but Richard and Pince are also young people. Even if he has experienced a lot, his real age is not very big. Peng Si finally laughed happily. Night approaching, the two came to a high-rise cafe. By the floor-to-ceiling windows, you can see the outside scene at a glance. Bright lights. How are you? Are you feeling better now? Much better. Would you like to stay here for 2 more days? No need. Peng Si shook her head and said, enough is enough. Okay, then let's go back tomorrow. Tonight, let's rest here first. 99, it is good. The night passed quietly. The next day, the two walked out of the hotel. Richard drove back to the forest. It was named Pine Manor by Richard because most of the trees that grow here are pine trees. Open the door. Buzz. It is the sound of the bees' wings beating. The bees dispersed when they realized it was Richard and Pince. But if it were someone else, the bees would attack right away. The car stopped at the entrance of a cave. The two got out of the car, walked along the cave, and entered the area of the Black Manor. Richard, I made up my mind. What? I've already thought about what I'm going to do. I want to be the same as you and become a cult hunter. Marin will become like that. And the cult must be inseparable. That way of nurturing bees is not what a normal beekeeper would think of. Richard nodded. From Marin's memory, Richard did read that Marin got something, and then he thought of using human blood to cultivate honey. The thing is very likely to come from a cult. So, Richard, can we still be together? Pince stared closely at Richard. Richard smiled. Aren't we together all the time? I mentioned this. There is no other meaning. After all, you're also living people. You will have what you want to do. If what you want to do is different from what I want to do, then I force you to do things for me without worrying about you. It's not very good. If we have the same goals now, it's fine. As long as you are willing, there will always be a place for you in my team. After receiving Richard's answer, Pince breathed a sigh of relief and nodded heavily. Well, I'll try to get stronger. 35 pause. Captain, what's our next plan? I'm going to the island of Greed to meet Dolong, Huasher, Betty, and Nyan and tell them about the Black Manor. If you say Peng Si, I need you to further strengthen the defense of the Black Manor and Pinewood Manor. 5 good. 95 Richard came to the Greed Island game client. After, enter the game. 35 a mass of air wrapped Richard around 5.0. After that, Richard's figure entered the game client. When Richard opened his eyes, he had come to the island of Greed, and Peng Si walked out and came to Pinewood Manor. At present, there are 3 types of bees under Peng Si's control. One is a bee with a mind. One is a Marin-cultured bee. One is the common bee. The first 2 kinds of Pincy gave them a name, namely the nun bee and the marlin bee. Nyan bee is undoubtedly the strongest, and marlin bees are much stronger than ordinary bees. Pinewood Manor, dominated by common bees and marlin. It's enough to deal with ordinary people who are not nun. The nun bees are arranged in the inner circle, so that the nun can't get close to the cave. The Black Manor is mainly composed of nostalgic bees. It can be paired with some marlin bees. That's Pence's plan. Chapter 210, The Person Who Ignores the Card. Use Magnetism 9. 35 The last time Richard came to Greed Island was a short time, but Richard knew the game of Greed Island better than most players. The power of the card is certainly strong, but for the real men strong, it is actually not enough to watch, because the card itself is made using none. Greed Island team. Currently, there's only gold freaks who can win Richard, but Kim freaks can't use all his thoughts to make a card. Then, the strength of these cards can be imagined. You again. Richard smiled when he saw the young man who was squatting on the newcomer's plane. It was the one Richard met last time. The young man's face turned pale. Sir, what card do you want? As long as I have it, I will give it to you. Give me a magnet. Yes, yes. Seeing Richard leave, the young man breathed a long sigh of relief. Terrible. Richard's figure came to the sky and approached in one direction at a very fast speed. Bang! 35, Richard fell to the ground. In front of them are 4 figures. Biscuit gone Kilo and Nyan. The 4 are training, but have moved to a new location. Richard, Gon reached out and waved, and Nyan trotted over directly. Want to pounce on Richard, but approached and hesitated. Because Nyan had just been training, he was sweating a lot. Nyan, how's your time going? Tired, but very fulfilling. Nyan said excitedly. Richard, I'm much stronger now. 99, really? Then I can look forward to it. 35, really? Biscuit says I'm making great progress. Progress is fast, that's for sure. Nyan's identity is a thief. In addition to the ability of divination, Nyan's physique is more or less affected, and it is inevitable that he will progress faster than ordinary people. But I haven't met the Huasher Dolong and Betty you mentioned, Richard. Richard nodded. Richard, did you come this time to pick me up? Almost. Richard said, I built a manor outside, which will be the base of our team in the future. I came in this time to take you, Hua, Sher Dolong, Betty, and the others out. Or, Nyan, do you want to stay here a little longer? Nyan looked back and shook his head. I want to be with you. Well, Richard went to Biscuit. Senior Biscuit, thank you for taking care of Nyan during this time. You're welcome. Biscuit waved his hand and said, I asked Nyan to give me a divination once. It's a fair deal. Gon and Killua came over. Richard, are you leaving? Richard nodded and said, this game doesn't mean much to us, and I have other things to do. When we find Huasher, Dolong, and Betty, we will leave. Have fun playing. Richard waved his hand. Nyan followed behind Richard and waved as well. Richard, Nyan, goodbye. Goodbye. For the Island of Greed, Richard is actually a little interested in some of the cards in it. However, when he realized that these were made by none, Richard's interest was greatly reduced. Made with none, it usually has a round effect. Same as the replica made by QB. Returning to base with something like this is risky. Richard is more interested in how the game of Greed Island is made. With Richard's current knowledge, it is not enough to accomplish such a thing. But Kim Freaks' team will not necessarily tell Richard this secret, unless Richard can come up with what they need. Equivalent exchange. But now Richard hasn't even seen Gold Freaks. The Greed Island team. Gold Freaks is the key among the keys. Richard, how are we going to find it? Go to a crowded place. Richard's approach is simple. Find those players and check their address book. Once they have contact with Hua, Sherdolong, and Betty, their names will appear on their address book. This information was learned by Richard through the plot. After Hisoka entered the game, he came into contact with Gon and Killua without the two of them knowing. However, Hisoka's name still appeared in Gon's address book. Hisoka disguised name, Krallo Lusilfer. Instead of using his real name, Hisoka used Krallo's name. In the plot, Hisoka also helped a lot in finding a savior for Krallo. Richard met a few players. Richard's hand had already fallen on the opponent's neck when the opponent had just materialized the book, and he didn't even have time to take out the card. As long as Richard moves, he can take the opponent's life. Don't get excited. I'm just looking for someone. Open your address book. Yes. This person felt the arrival of the breath of death, and the whole person trembled. No, there was a gleam of death in Richard's eyes. Okay, let's go. Richard withdrew his hand. Thank you. 95 Richard found a second player. The Island of Greed is huge. There are many NPCs. However, there are actually not many players entering the game, just a few hundred, because there are a total of 100 game clients. A game client can accommodate 4 players at the same time. This means that the maximum number of players online at the same time is 400. Player after player flees frantically. A legend is slowly spreading in this city. The person who ignores the card. These fleeing players described Richard's appearance and strength as extremely terrifying. Can stop the kind of children crying at night. Found it. Richard finally saw the names of Hua, Sherdolong, and Betty in a player's address book. This is a middle-aged man. Not even none. Use your peers. Hua Sherdolong, understand? After I'm done, I'll let you go. My lord, I have no company. Without the line, Richard shook his head, took out one from his own, and handed it over. Use it. 5 yes. The middle-aged man held the card tremblingly. Use your peers, Hua Sherdolong. The next moment, a ball of light enveloped Richard, the middle-aged man, and Nyan. Hua Sherdolong looked up at the sky. Betty, be careful. It looks like something is coming. Good. 99 Betty also looked up at the sky. Bang! 35-3 of Richard fell to the ground. Team leader? Big brother. When Hua Sherdolong and Betty saw that it was Richard, they breathed a sigh of relief and their faces brightened. Captain, why did you come in? Are you trying to clear this game? 35 Richard shook his head and said, No, I'm here to take you out. There's nothing to clear in this game. Let's leave this game first. I have something to tell you. By the way, do you have any cards to leave? No. Chapter 211 Next Step Plan. Then we need to get some departure cards first. Use a peer. Marthadora. Macedora is a game city with the most cards, and many spell cards can be purchased directly from here. You can leave now. Richard looked at the middle-aged. Okay. The middle-aged hurried away. I haven't introduced you yet. Richard pointed to Nyan and said, This is Nyan, a new member of our team. His ability is divination. It can predict a person's good or bad for the next month. It is presented in the form of a prophetic poem, which is very detailed. Betty couldn't help but look over. This is Hua Doru, the enhancer. 9, this is Betty. Richard looked at Betty. Betty, have you regained your abilities now? It has been brought back. Betty nodded and said, Brother Hua Sherdolong has taught me none. My ability is also divination, but my ability is to divination the position of a thing. 5 hearing the sentence, 9 immediately looked at Betty. Both are capable of divination, but the direction of divination is different. Then let's collect the left cards now for, yes, 55, and when Richard and the 4 were collecting cards, the rumor of the person who ignored the card has slowly spread among the players. Phaeton sat on a bench by the road. Next to it is Flake Leviticus. Fink stood. A person who ignores the card? This level, we can easily do it. Most of the players who enter this game are simply not strong enough. Indeed, this game is not interesting. It's just collecting cards. I thought the cards in this game were interesting, but in fact, they were just reciting. Fink said something suddenly. I don't know what Maggie, Nabinaga, Yuvijin are doing. They all left the brigade just like us. 39. I heard that they seem to have gone to the Sky Arena. Sky Arena? What's there to do in that place? Probably to make money. Peeling Lev said, "After all, the team's funds are all in the hands of the head of the team. After we leave the team, it is equivalent to nothing." 99 Feeton looked at Flaking Lev, then at Finks. "I want to leave this game. How about you?" "Same. Let's go then." Gonshu looked at the players in front of him and frowned. "You said you didn't have the power to resist when you faced that person?" "Yes." 35 the team members nodded and said, "My reaction was already very fast at that time. I opened the distance and realized it, but when I just took the card in my hand, that person had already appeared behind me. With his hand on my neck, as long as I move, he can kill me." Gonshu's expression became serious. "Do you think the three of us together will be his opponent?" "Won't." Gonshu's face sank. "Then it's troublesome. How can such a strong person come in this game? Is there anything here that can attract him?" "Impossible." 99. "Then our plan can't be completed, isn't it?" The players hesitated. "Gonshu, this person seems to have just come in looking for someone." 35. "Find someone." "Yes, he just checked my address book and took a few prop cards. He didn't take the number card. If he wanted to collect cards, he would definitely not." Gonshu breathed a sigh of relief. "That can't be careless. I'll send someone to observe it." Biscuit frowned upon hearing the news. "Fast people don't even have a chance to use the card." 55. "And only look at the address book." 99. "This should be Richard. It is indeed the most efficient way." After a short while, the four left are collected. One per person. "Then let's begin." For people use cards at the same time. Use leave. The next moment, the figures of the four were wrapped in a mass of light. It was originally a group of four, but gradually it became a mass. Because the destination of the four is the same. Entered from the same Greed Island game client. Here is Washer Dolong and Betty remember that the place where they entered the game was an apartment of Ukexen. Richard deliberately bought it. "This is Black Manor." Richard said, "Our team's base. This is a canyon. There is a cliff above, and only one cave is a normal exit. The forest outside the cave has been purchased by me. It's called Pinewood Manor outside. In addition to its own terrain, topography, privacy, and safety. The mountain bees also live here as part of our defense. Once outsiders get in, they attack. Even if it's a nun, it can't be good. I'll take you to the hive first. Bees are controlled by queen bees. The queen bee is controlled by Peng Si." Richard brought everyone to the huge hive. A scent of honey wafted out. Sweet but not greasy. A thought bee landed in front of Richard. There was a vibration of wings. "Buzz." Richard nodded. "Okay, now you can move freely inside the base and not be attacked by bees." Washer Dolong looked at the bee. His pupils shrank. "Captain, this bee can read?" "Yes." 99 Richard nodded and said, "That's why I said, with their defenses, we will be very safe here. Even if Hisoka wants to sneak in, it's not easy." Washer Dolong's pupil shrank. Hisoka's strength. Washer Doru is very clear. Is this Pensie's ability? Washer Dolong knew that Peng Si's ability was related to bees. That's it. Hearing this sentence, Washer Doru couldn't help feeling a sense of urgency. Before, the strength of Hua Sherdolong was stronger than that of Peng Si. Peng Si studied later than Hua Sherdolong. But now that Peng Si has such a means, her own progress is not much. The voice just fell. Peng Si's figure is that Qian Hao came from the other side. "Captain, you are back." 99, is this Nyan? Pence looked at Nyan. "Hello." Richard pointed to the direction of the residential area and said, "Because it was just me and Pence, we just build our own wooden house, but I have already bought all the materials." "You can always build your own." Richard looked at the time. "It's getting late. Let's eat first. After eating, I will talk about our next plan." Pence turned and walked to the kitchen. "I'm going to prepare." Betty followed. "Sister Peng Si, I'll come too." Nine didn't go because Nine doesn't know how to cook. He's really not good at cooking. Once born, there is a maid to take care of him. You don't need to tie it yourself at all. "Captain, do we have any mission?" 95 Washer Dolong looked at Richard. Chapter 2:12 The Death of Nathra No. Richard shook his head and said, "Let's talk about it later." 55 After a while, the dishes came up. Fruits, vegetables, meats, all of them. Some were purchased from the outside world. Others were captured from around the cliffs and Pinewood Manor. Those bees are pretty good. Whether picking fruit or hunting ordinary beasts, it doesn't matter. But hunting is not a long-term solution after all. Richard's plan was to build a plantation and breeding garden at Pinewood Estate. In this way, it can be maximized without relying on external supplies. In terms of manpower, Richard has already made plans. Create a doll using the death thought of the face. Use these dolls to manage the Pinewood Manor. As long as the strength of the dolls produced is not very strong, then there is no need for a lot of key, and the face of C rank can be fully tolerated. With so many NPCs in the Island of Greed, the producers are only those few people. And what Pinewood Manor needs are only a few dozen. Dining room and kitchen are connected. In the middle is a huge dining table. Richard and the five sat down. I have to say that none of the people present are good at cooking. Richard can't, Hua Delong can't, Nine can't, and Peng Si and Betty can only be regarded as 0.83 average. Richard said while eating, "About our team, I thought about it seriously. Before, I'm mainly focused on my goals, but this is not healthy for a team. You also have your own ideals and goals. The main reason to bring everyone back this time is to discuss this issue. Because my goal is to clear the world of cults and investigate information about the media, grievances, and infected people. This is the general direction of the team in the future, but I don't know what you think." Richard first looked at Hua Dolong. "Hua Dolong, you speak first." 99 Hua Duru hesitated for a while, then said, "I just want to become stronger. My short-term goal is to defeat Hisoka, and in the long term, I want to become stronger. Captain, those cults, as well as resentments and infected people, are all very strong, right?" Richard nodded. "Very strong. There is no doubt that the power of the medium is beyond ordinary." Hua Dolong showed a smile. "Then I have no problem. Captain, take me with you. I want to keep getting stronger in the battle against cults, resentments, and infected people. I want to stand on the front line of battle." Hua Dolong's idea is simple. "Betty, how about you?" Betty bowed her head. "My life was saved by you, big brother. So I just want to follow you, big brother. No matter what you ask me to do, I can do it."
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.